Apocalypse. I can steal superpowers. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 376, Ancient House. I won't guess. Sukinghan blinked his eyes, looking at the rain falling under the umbrella. His expression relaxed, as if he had already figured it out. Kinghan, what did you find out? Tell me. Gluo was really curious about what Sukinghan had found out from all this messy information. Unfortunately, Sukinghan didn't tell him, but just pointed forward and asked Gluo to look forward. They are waiting for us. Why don't you go over there? Gluo didn't react at first, and when he looked ahead carefully, he found that the old village chief and the secretary known as Kidatao had stopped at some point, as if waiting for them. Kinghan, how did you know they were here? Gluo didn't think about it at first, but at this time he found that when the two of them went out, the old village chief had disappeared, but Sukinghan led Gluo to walk around randomly, and they just happened to follow behind the old village chief. You left a mark on the head of the village. Is there something wrong with him? You are so stupid. I just stayed behind and asked for directions. Sukinghan smiled and narrowed her eyes. She looked like a little fox whose plan had succeeded. She had an inexplicably charming temperament. Gluo had never seen Sukinghan like this before. He was immediately amazed. In order to avoid embarrassment, Gluo simply stopped talking and just pulled Sukinghan towards the direction of the old village chief. Gluo, you are such a fool. Sukinghan let herself be led by Gluo. She looked over, and her eyes swept across the surrounding alleys coldly. There was still a smile on the corner of her mouth, but she didn't have any of the charm she had before. It was just so cold that it made people's spine cold. On the other side, the old village chief and Kidatao were relieved to see Gluo and the others following them. The old village chief was in a hurry just now, and forgot to call Gluo and the others. After all, there were many outsiders of unknown origin on the other side, and some were seriously injured. In this situation, Sukinghan and Gluo were too important. Young man, sorry to bother you. We have to ask you to go again. Uncle G, it's okay. We still need to bother you. Gluo had a good impression of the old village chief. He worked hard for Yizin's injury and waited for the city to come in the heavy rain at night. It was not easy. Moreover, Gluo could feel that the old village chief was very worried about them since he knew their identities. He told them to be careful several times. In the heavy rain, the four people who met did not talk much and immediately walked to the crime scene. Gluo held Sukinghan's hand and walked slowly. It was precisely because of this leisure time that Gluo discovered that the buildings in Maoan village looked very historical. Of course, it is not to say that the houses of each household are dilapidated, but that their houses retain the style of a long time ago. It is estimated that they are not rebuilt, but are constantly renovated. In a remote village like Maoan village, the village's income comes from farming all year round. Although there are buses, there is nothing to do and no one goes to the city. With this income level, they can't afford to build a two-story building that costs 200,000 or 300,000 yuan. They can only repair their own house. The outside has not been repaired much, so it looks very ancient. What's more interesting is that under the guidance of the old village chief, Gluo and his companions actually followed through a gate that is unique to ancient mansions. It's called a gate, but in fact, only the door frame is left. The two door fronts have disappeared, but the steps are still quite high. On both sides of the gate are the ancient walls. You can't see the end of the wall if you take a quick look. Kinghan, this is such a big mansion. Gluo basically moves around in the north. This is the first time he has been to the south. This kind of mansion in the south is really the first time Gluo has seen it. There may be some courtyard scenes in TV dramas, but that kind of scenery is really far less amazing than walking in it in person. Big, let me tell you, the people who used to live here were the local emperors of Maoan village, a family with a family tree. Sukinghan was also looking at the surrounding scenery with interest at this time. It was a pity that most of the former gardens and courtyards were demolished and replaced with houses for ordinary people. Because they are not very old, they are all modern style squares, which look out of tune with the ancient buildings around them. It is said that decades ago, all the arable land in the entire Mayoan village belonged to this family, and everyone was a tenant, farming for them. It's a pity that later there was chaos and war, and most of the people in this family died. There were only 1 or 2 people in the family of 1 or 200, and the huge family fell into decline. After the reform, this courtyard was taken back, the land was measured, and distributed to each household. Well, someone directly occupied a side room, repaired it and treated it as his own home. Sukinghan pointed to the remaining buildings to GLUO. The house had white walls and black tiles, and it looked exquisite. It's a pity that the brick and tile house next to it destroyed the integrity, which made people feel a little sorry. These are all ancient buildings. It's a pity to destroy them. That family must have been very rich back then. They must have a lot of gold, silver, jade and antiques. GLUO was a rather vulgar person. His first thought was how rich the family was. Sukinghan smiled and bumped her shoulder, as if complaining that he didn't understand the weight of history. What kind of money could there be? They were all taken away during the revolution. There must be room for some things, but not too much. On the contrary, this house is too big, so it's impossible to keep it. It can only be divided among the households, and half demolished, and half rebuilt for people to live in. Sukinghan had obviously looked into the history of the house. GLUO listened to her, and nodded in agreement. However, after a few seconds, GLUO realized that what she said didn't sound right. Kinghan, did you contact the head of the Wangsheng Hall while I was sleeping and buy a lot of information from her? Yes. Do you want to see it? I'll give it to you later. Sukinghan had expected this to happen and made an expression of didn't I tell you. GLUO snorted angrily, and then he understood. No wonder Sukinghan could detect other things. She was well prepared. Send it to me now. GLUO's expression of I see through you made the girl giggle. She was about to take out her mobile phone and send the information to GLUO, but was stopped by GLUO. It's raining. Don't let your phone get wet. And, we've arrived at our destination. Although GLUO and Sukinghan had been flirting all the way, he was not really distracted. He was paying attention to the situation around him. At this time, more than 100 meters ahead, a crowd of people gathered in the heavy rain. There were at least 40 or 50 people surrounding a certain room. This old Wu lives in an ice house. It's even the main building. Chapter 377. Congratulations. It's really beautiful. If it were placed in a big city, this house would be enough to buy half the houses in this village. GLUO's words sounded like an exclamation, but Sukinghan said to him, I always feel like you are hinting at something. No, I'm not hinting at anything. I'm making it clear. GLUO raised his eyebrows at Sukinghan. Sukinghan bumped his shoulder with his head, but didn't continue to tease him, because at this time, they were already close to the scene of the incident. Although there were many villagers in the surrounding crowd, most of them were outsiders. Some of them were wearing raincoats and some were holding umbrellas, but the same thing was that they had something in their hands, or on their backs, and it could be guessed from the shape that they were weapons. The old village chief is here. Everyone make way, make way. Kidabotao, the secretary, failed. He walked in front of the old village chief like a lackey, shouting directly for people to make way. Outsiders seemed a little careless and just slowly made way. On the contrary, the villagers made way reflexively, obviously respecting the old village chief. The old village chief did not put on a show at this time. He walked a few steps inside, looked at the people around him, and began to shout, Village people, don't be so curious. Come here for everything. It's raining so hard. What are you doing outside? Go back. Just leave a few representatives here. Don't delay things. The old village chief's shouting was really a good thing. No one in the village dared to say anything. They all went home. They said they would leave a few representatives, but in fact, except for Kidatao, basically everyone went back. Kinghan, this old village chief has an incredible prestige. GLUO felt a little emotional when he saw this scene. Rural people of their age generally had no education and were more or less stubborn. but the old village chief just swept around and made everyone go home with a few words. It was really amazing. No wonder the secretary Kidata was such a lackey. It turns out that the old village chief is really amazing. Yeah, it's really amazing. Sukinghan didn't have much experience in her tone, but just sighed a little. Luo glanced at her and was about to say something, but was pulled inside by Sukinghan. At this time, the old village chief was waiting for the two of them. Then, the four people walked into the house surrounded by the crowd. To Luo's surprise, although there were many people outside, there were not so many people in the house. Luo secretly counted them. There were only 7 people in total. Looking carefully, 6 of them were obviously visitors from outside the village, and there were 2 familiar figures among them. That is, the pair of brothers who sat behind Luo and Sukinghan in the bus today, Liu Fangsu and Wang Fucheng. Before, Luo didn't quite believe that Wang Fucheng was a disciple of Maotian outer sect and practiced the art of all things, but now, Luo believes him a little. It was obvious that the 6 people who could go into the house to investigate were all important figures. Probably in their Zuanai world, the people outside all respected these 6 people. Therefore, these 6 people could look for clues in the house and jointly determine the truth of the incident. They even had to discuss a result and announce it to the outsiders. In addition to these 6 people, the 7th person was shrinking in the corner at this time. He was a white-haired old man who looked timid. But this old man had triangular eyes and a pointed chin. From his facial features, it was clear that he was a difficult person to get along with. However, at this time, the old man was obviously frightened. He stood in the corner, his face stiff with laughter. He was obviously soaked by the rain, but he didn't dare to change his clothes. When he saw the old village chief enter the house, this timid old man immediately came over, and his attitude was completely different from usual. Village Chief G, you are finally here. I know nothing about this, and they just started fighting for no reason. Old Wu, don't try to distance yourself from the matter right away. Go stand there, I'll ask you later. The old village chief obviously didn't like this Wu, but he didn't say anything sarcastic, just a little serious. Okay, I'll wait. Old Wu also knew what was good and what was bad. Although the old village chief's words were a reprimand, they actually let him get out of the circle of being questioned. First, sort out the things, and then ask him questions. The old village chief didn't care about old Wu's gratitude. He took off his raincoat, walked into the inner room, and bowed to the 6 people in charge, quite like an ancient etiquette. Everyone, what happened? Do you have any clues? Old village chief, thank you for your help. The first person to answer in the room was a young man in his 30s. He walked closer and bowed. When the young man was standing in the dim room, Luo did not notice him. When he walked outside, Luo noticed that the man was really tall, probably about 2 meters. Moreover, he was very strong. His body was not strong, but the muscles under his clothes were sharp and angular. He was definitely a martial artist. His skin was slightly dark, but his eyes were bright. When the young man came closer, he also found Luo and Sukinghan. He did not say anything, but greeted them first, with a very calm attitude. My name is He Pingan, from Langhu Mountain, and you two are? Mr. He, this is Sukinghan, who studied medicine, and this is her boyfriend, Luo. The old village chief seemed to be afraid that Luo and the others would say something wrong, so he introduced them first. At this time, Luo put the umbrella on the ground and turned off the flashlight, but still held Sukinghan's hand. Oh, that's it. He Pingan also understood at this time that Sukinghan should be the best doctor in the village, and the old village chief brought her here to treat her injuries. As for Luo's alert look, He Pingan naturally understood the meaning of the question, but he just smiled and didn't express it. Miss Sukinghan, excuse me, how is Miss Yizing? He Pingan's tone of questioning was very natural, as if he was really just concerned about his friend's condition. But when he heard his question, Luo's expression was not right. Yizing's condition was obviously not something that ordinary people could cure. He Pingan asked this question. In fact, he was asking openly whether Sukinghan was an evolver. And Yizing's injury was basically corroded by the residual soul source power. Bronze level evolvers can't release source power, and they can't be saved. Those who can use their own source power to neutralize soul source power must be at least second black iron level evolvers, so that they can release source power. So, this Ipingan is not ordinary, just cutting a question short and asking 1,000 twists and turns directly. It's like exposing someone's past. He didn't even care about the things in front of him. When he saw someone he didn't know, he asked this question all over the place. Obviously, this person is extremely cautious. My girlfriend can't be cured. You go and try. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378, Reasonable Explanation. Also, my girlfriend doesn't like talking to strangers. Please stay away. Gluo stood in front of Sukinghan and spoke in a very bad tone. Of course, facing a rude person like Ipingan, Gluo did nothing wrong. Sorry, I'm sorry. Ipingan completely ignored Gluo's attitude, as if Gluo was just an ant and not worthy of his attention. On the contrary, Sukinghan, with her long ice blue hair and beautiful face, showed that she was not an ordinary person. On the other side, the old village chief saw that the atmosphere between the three people was not right, so he interrupted to prevent the three people from really getting out of control. Mr. He, what happened here? Oh, it's not a big problem. It's just that two people who had grievances before suddenly met and quarreled for a few words, and then they started fighting. Ipingan said it lightly, as if the death of one person was nothing at all. What was even more annoying was that the other 5 people around him also had very normal expressions, as if they were used to it. So that's the case. Where is the injured? Let Miss Sukinghan treat him. The old village chief spoke slowly, and after getting Ipingan's explanation, he accepted it directly. Everyone could see that there were some flaws in Ipingan's words, but no one pointed it out, so the old village chief didn't want to pursue it. After all, these people are outsiders, and their lives and deaths have nothing to do with him. As long as the villagers are fine, let them do whatever they want. Anyway, Gluo and Sukinghan, 2 government officials, will take care of it. The injured are still in critical condition, and are being settled in the house next door. Ipingan pointed to the house on the right. The old village chief nodded, packed up and prepared to go out. Gluo and Sukinghan naturally planned to follow. Ipingan didn't expect the 3 people to be so easy to get rid of, so he turned around and went back into the house. Wang Fucheng on the other side came over instead. Brother Gluo, the weather is bad tonight. Go to bed early. Of course, I'm sleepy too. Gluo didn't expect Wang Fucheng to come to remind him. Although Wang Fucheng didn't elaborate, he was sure that this person's death was a bit strange. Old Wu, don't stand there stupidly. Come with me. The old village chief had already put on a raincoat at this time. He looked very casual when he made the suggestion, and the old man in the corner came over immediately. Ipingan in the house glanced at the owner, but did not stop him from leaving. The old village chief did not wait any longer, and led the 3 people directly to the injured person's room. Unlike the ancient style building of Old Wu, this room is a standard modern square. The 4 people walked into the room, put away the rain gear, and no one came to greet them. Sister-in-law who? The old village chief shouted, but did not see the owner of the house. He led Gluo and the other 2 into the inner room, and then they found the injured person on the bed. The seriously injured man was slightly fat, and his face looked very unpleasant. He was lying on the mattress with more than a dozen knife wounds on his body. The most fatal one was in the heart, which was directly pierced through. Miss Sukinghan, do you think the person can be saved? The old village chief knocked left and right, but didn't see the owner of the house. When he saw the person on the bed, he basically understood that when this person was carried into the house, he probably breathed in more than he breathed out. The owner was afraid of getting involved, so he took away someone else's home. And those outsiders were also cruel. They checked the injured and felt that they could not be saved, so they threw the person here without even anyone to look after him. Sukinghan was not affected by these nonsense. Other people's affairs had nothing to do with her. The right thing to do was to save people immediately. Old village chief, this person is no longer alive. Sukinghan checked briefly and could only shake his head. The person had lost too much blood and was in shock. There was no time to suture the wound. He was definitely dead. Good man. The person who did it is cruel enough. GLUO also came over and looked at the knife wounds on the victim's body. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of grudges and hatreds could have caused such a heavy blow. It doesn't take a professional to see that the perpetrator was fighting with all his might, aiming to kill people. In the end, both sides were all dead. Nizzy, you don't have to feel bad. This is fate. It's not your fault. They are all looking for death. The old village chief was afraid that Sukinghan would be affected, so he comforted her. Sukinghan didn't show any strange expression, but just showed an expression of regret and powerlessness. Seeing that Sukinghan was calm, the old village chief turned his attention to Old Wu on the side. As the first eyewitness, he should know something. Old Wu, tell me the truth. What happened? What happened? Old village chief, this matter really has nothing to do with me. You know me. I just love money and do things a little bit cheaply, but I'm not a person who will hurt others. Old Wu had just seen the murder scene and was terrified. Although he was very dissatisfied with the old village chief, he was really scared at this time. He was already in his 50s or 60s, and he looked really pitiful when he was crying and talking at this time, but the old village chief was not moved at all, just staring at him. Old Wu, tell the truth. Don't do these useless things. Old village chief. To be honest, the man living in my house is the one who died. He loves to drink. Didn't I brew some wine some time ago? I was thinking of selling it to him while talking. Old Wu was still looking at the old village chief, as if he wanted to change the subject when he saw the situation was not good, but the old village chief was very experienced, and there was no emotion on his face. Old Wu had no choice but to continue talking. First of all, the people outside are very generous, but this person has no martial ethics and wants to take advantage of me. Of course I don't agree and don't want to sell it. But this person actually threw out 100 yuan and brought my big bucket of wine to the table. I disagreed, so he pushed me to the ground. I didn't know what to do, so I didn't dare to say anything. But the man was still not giving up, drinking and cursing. The person on the bed probably heard the cursing and thought he was being scolded, so he rushed into the room. Then the two of them quarreled for a few words, cursing each other very badly, and then they fought, like they were the murderers of their father. Old Wu gestured with his hands the movements of the two at that time, and then mentioned a few words of the two people's quarreling, which were indeed vicious and ugly, and it was almost inevitable to fight. It seems that two people who already had conflicts, because one of them misunderstood, found the other person with anger, and the two quarreled and fought, and finally died together, which sounds reasonable. GLUO listened to the general situation, but did not accept this reason. He stepped back a few steps and stood at the door of the room. Uncle Wu, think carefully. When that person was sitting in your house drinking and cursing, was the sound loud? Not small. How loud is not small? Show me. Chapter 379. Steady. GLUO is not a person who likes to get to the bottom of things, but two lives were lost just like that, and the gang was still trying to cover up the truth, which really made people's backs cold. Since he was also in the middle of the situation, GLUO would certainly not give up, so he began to use Old Wu's description as a breakthrough point to explore the truth of the matter. Old Wu, keep this voice and keep cursing. Don't stop. GLUO first stood at the door of the inner room, then stood in the outer room, and finally took an umbrella and went out. In the heavy rain, GLUO could vaguely hear the cursing in the house, and then he walked a few steps further away, until he could no longer hear the cursing. At this time, the distance between GLUO and the house was actually only 7 or 8 meters. Interesting. GLUO looked around, then pushed the door back into the house, and put the umbrella on the ground. The old village chief looked at GLUO's expression, and knew what he had discovered, and immediately became anxious. Brother GLUO, have you found any problems? I did find some problems, but they are not big problems. GLUO winked at Sukinghan, indicating that she should not say anything, and just listen to his judgment. Normally, the man was cursing in the house, and although his voice was loud, it could only be heard clearly in the house. outside, as long as the door was not open, it was not very clear. If just now, old Wu's voice was not deliberately lowered, and it was completely the volume of the man's shouting and cursing, then if you go outside, plus the sound of the heavy rain, ordinary people can't hear anything at all, unless they listen close to the door. It's all the sound of rain. Also, I just noticed that the intruder on the bed didn't have a raincoat on him, and his clothes were wet, and he didn't look like he was going to go out. Instead, it seemed that he rushed out of the house in a hurry, and his clothes got wet, but because he quickly entered the house, his clothes were not completely soaked. The doubts given by GLUO were not difficult to judge. Although the old village chief didn't notice the clothes of the man on the bed just now, he took a few glances now, and it was indeed a bit strange. It was such a heavy rain outside, who would have nothing to do outside to wander around, and the house, where this person was arranged, was still a distance away from old Wu's house, so it was impossible for him to hear the shouting and cursing while sitting in the house. It's true, a little strange. The old village chief was reminded by GLUO, and found a new direction. After all, he was a native of this village, and had an understanding of the layout of the houses and the situation of each family. If the whole thing was linked together, as long as old Wu Tao didn't lie, there would definitely be a problem. Old Wu Tao, tell the truth. Did you say you lied to me? Village chief. I swear on my whole family. I really didn't lie. This is a matter of a dead person. How dare I talk nonsense? When old Wu Tao saw that he had a chance to get rid of the doubts, he immediately became energetic. He swore a poisonous oath directly, which looked really like that. That's fine. The old village chief was also a very decisive person. Since he chose to believe old Wu Tao, the doubts about the matter could be established. Brother GLUO, you said, why did he Pingan and others cover up and pretend that nothing happened? For the sake of profit? Or to make a final conclusion and sever the relationship? GLUO was also very curious now. Why did he Pingan make such a straightforward judgment on the case? Or what rules did the 6 people discuss when they were crowded in the house? 2 living people, one died directly, and the other died of serious injuries. No one cared and just threw them into the house to die. To put it nicely, it is called watching someone die without rescuing them, and to put it bluntly, it is indirect murder. Whether the person can be saved is one question, but whether you save him or not is another question. Su Qinghan listened for a long time and made her own judgment. She tapped the chair with her fingertips to attract the attention of others. Is it possible that they discovered the truth behind this matter? And this truth, if told to everyone, will cause a mutiny. In order to maintain order, they remain silent and just cover up the matter. Yes, this statement is very dramatic. He Pingan's attitude just now doesn't seem like an attitude of explanation. GLUO felt that he was still kind and didn't think of people as so vicious. When someone died, his first thought was to pursue the truth, but that group of people wanted to cover up the truth. Thinking of this, GLUO turned his head and glanced at old Wu, making this unfriendly old man nervous. There is only one eyewitness to the whole thing, old Wu. They let us bring him here so easily. They are very determined. GLUO can now be sure that the death of these 2 people definitely hides a chilling truth, but thinking about Pingan's attitude, he doesn't want to cooperate. Moreover, Wang Fuchen's reminder is also very interesting. The weather is bad tonight, go to bed early. To listen to it directly, it seems that there is no problem, but if it is linked to the truth of the matter, does it mean that there is a danger spreading that will endanger GLUO's life? But as long as you fall asleep, you can avoid disasters. Old village chief, do you want to continue investigating? GLUO did not get excited and directly said that he wanted to find the truth, but gave the choice to the old village chief. He is the local snake here, and his decision is definitely right. To put it bluntly, GLUO is now picking himself out. No matter what he does, let the old village chief take the lead, and he can just be a follower, a temporary worker who does not stick to the pan. With constant contact, GLUO found more and more that this old village chief was not an ordinary person. Not only was his prestige in the village unmatched, but his judgment of things was also very vicious. When people get old, they are smarter, ghosts get smarter, and rabbits get old and can kick eagles. Young people still need to learn more from the elderly and follow their path. Alas, this group of people are so restless on the first day they came. The old village chief sighed helplessly, looking very helpless, but his tone and beginning were obviously paving the way. Forget it, we have no right to interfere with the decisions of these outsiders. Wait until the rain stops, the road is repaired, and the free police make a judgment. We outsiders should not cause trouble, that's right. I don't think we need to interfere. GLUO followed the decision of the old village chief without hesitation. The old man raised his head and looked at GLUO in surprise with his turbid eyes. It seems that he didn't expect GLUO's idea to be so straightforward, and GLUO just smiled in response. He reached out and held Su King-hun's hand. The girl pursed her lips and didn't say anything, obviously obeying GLUO's decision. As for old Wu, he wished that everyone would stop pursuing the matter. He had just stood in the corner in fear, but now he was laughing. Therefore, the decision to stop and turn a blind eye was passed unanimously. Although the seriously injured man on the bed did not vote, he had already stopped breathing due to excessive blood loss. Obviously, this was a not very critical abstention vote. Chapter 380, Judgment. It was obviously a matter of life and death for two people, but they had their own taboos, so they let the most incredible option of standing by and watching pass unanimously. At this time, the old village chief also secretly looked at GLUO and the other two. They were obviously Yi Xin's companions, but their principles of behavior were completely different. If it were Yi Xin, she would have rushed up to find out, but this couple just made light of it and let the matter go. Of course, this was also the result that the old village chief hoped for the most, so he didn't say anything, just nodded. When the few people quieted down at this time, the atmosphere became weird. There was someone who had just died on the bed, and the others in the house gave up the pursuit. It was simply ruthless. The rain outside the window did not stop, and the dark clouds covered the sun. It was still 2 or 3 hours before it got dark, but it was pitch dark around. Obviously everything had been decided, and everyone could change the topic, but no one in the room spoke. GLUO was kneading Su King-hun's palm, looking calm and relaxed. Su King-hun had no expression, looking out the window, not knowing what he was thinking. Old Wu was sympathetic and dared not speak. The old village chief had an expression of thinking about something, and his palms were patting on his legs. Inside the house, there was a dead person and 4 living people, each with their own thoughts and concerns, forming a wonderful balance. No one spoke, as if waiting for others to speak. Of course, the 4 people did not wait, and soon someone knocked on the door, and a dark and thin figure walked in. Liu Fang's. GLUO did not expect that this person with something in mind would come here at this time. Have they finished discussing the matter between the 6 people? Have the interests been divided, or have they reached a deal? Is the person dead? Liu Fang's was not a talkative person, and he did not say hello, but directly asked the result. Dead. Okay, sign it. Liu Fang's did not mean to check the dead person, or he had already checked it before. At this time, Liu Fang's took out a piece of paper from his pocket, put it on the table, and motioned the 4 people to sign their names. Old village chief, there must be a result. We are not officials, so we cannot decide anything, but we must bear the responsibilities. Okay. The old village chief took the paper, took a look, and simply signed it. Then old Wu also looked at it, and signed his name. Liu Fang's checked the signature, and then handed the paper to Su King-hun. The girl was stunned for a moment, and did not take it. GLUO reached out and took it. Determination of the cause of death. GLUO really didn't expect that Liu Fang's and the other 6 people would do this. It was obviously not official at all. What's the meaning of writing this now? Is it a serial port? Brother Liu, what is it for? The police won't recognize it. How can the police recognize this? It's just to give people outside an explanation to reassure them. The reason given by Assistant Liu Fang seemed to make sense. GLUO nodded and read it carefully. There was no trap on the paper. It just described the previous situation, and then both people died. It had nothing to do with other people, and it was not a supernatural event. Okay, I'll sign it. My girlfriend is not a doctor, so it would be a problem if it is written down. GLUO didn't ask Su King-hun's opinion and signed his name directly. Assistant Liu Fang glanced at Su Qinghan and nodded. Miss Su, your boyfriend is not bad. Really? I think so too. Su Qinghan held Luo's left hand at this time, revealing a sweet smile, as if he was really moved. It has to be said that Luo signed this word for a reason. In the minds of others, Su Qinghan represents the doctor. In this case, her failure to treat the seriously injured is equivalent to examining the body of the deceased, that is, the forensic doctor. Su Qinghan is the forensic doctor, Old Wu is the witness, the old village chief is the credibility of the village, and He Pinggan and the other 6 people are representatives nominated by outsiders. These parties have signed, and if there is a problem, it must be Old Wu, the witness, first, and then Su Qinghan, the forensic doctor. She is the main evidence for certain judgments. But if Luo signs this word, then things will be different. Luo is an ordinary person. Why should he prove it? He heard it from his girlfriend. And his girlfriend Su Qinghan only told Luo, but did not make a guarantee. It was Luo who made the guarantee, but Luo actually did not have the ability and qualifications to guarantee it. After all these things, if something went wrong, Luo would be blamed for getting involved. He was a person who didn't know anything about a ball of wool, so he was just fooled. What crime could he have committed? So, Luo took all the consequences for Su Qinghan's sake. It might be the official side, or it might be the 6 people including He Pinggan who were targeting him. However, Liu Fang's who didn't say much about these twists and turns. He folded the signed paper and put it in his pocket. Then he said a word and turned around and walked out. The weather is bad tonight, go to bed early. Yeah. Luo responded in a heavy voice this time. Wang Fuchen reminded him, and now Liu Fang's who reminded him. If he didn't understand it, he would be a fool. Obviously, the village is not safe, and it will not be peaceful tonight. Although he doesn't know what the danger is, sleeping can definitely avoid problems to a certain extent. After Liu Fang's who left, Luo seemed to be relieved. He twisted his head and looked around, listened to people's advice, eat a full meal, let's go and find a place to sleep. Okay, I'll find you a place to sleep. The old village chief also stood up at this time, and it seemed that he didn't want to stay here anymore, and Old Wu was even more happy. Su Qinghan was the only one there, and it seemed that he didn't care about anything, and didn't care about anything. Old village chief, there's no need to bother. There are so many beds on the 2nd floor of the hospital, we can just live there. Okay, you can also protect Yizin. The old village chief was stunned for a moment, and then agreed directly. He put on his raincoat and prepared to go out. Luo and Su Qinghan also picked up umbrellas. Village chief, Old Wu was a little anxious at this time. Someone had died in his family, and he didn't dare to live there anymore. Find a place to live by yourself. The old village chief didn't care about Old Wu, and it seemed that the relationship between the two was not very good. He left a word and walked directly into the rain. Luo and Su Qinghan followed him and left the room. In the heavy rain that covered the sky, Luo held Su Qinghan's hand with one hand and held a flashlight in the other hand. He looked very calm, but after taking a few steps, Luo suddenly turned his head and glanced at Old Wu at the door of the house. At this time, Old Wu was obviously a little at a loss. He stood at the door uneasily, looking at his own house, and was a little afraid to go back. Chapter 381, G Family. Of course, Luo was not looking at these. Just now, the old village chief said in front of Old Wu, you can still protect Yizin. This sentence is not simple. There are too many twists and turns involved. Deliberate? Or did you really not expect it? Luo held Su Qinghan's hand and followed behind the old village chief. Looking at the old man who was struggling to move forward in the rainstorm, he felt more and more that this old village chief was not simple. On the other side, it seemed that it was the credit of He Pinggan and the other 6 people. The people gathered at the door of Old Wu's house began to disperse gradually. They seemed to really believe the truth of the matter, or they didn't believe it at all, but just knew that continuing to watch would not get any results. It was very strange and incredible. A small village has become a huge chess game with many parties making moves. The chess players have their own ulterior motives and make unknown plans. On the village side, the old village chief did not show his true colors, but arranged things clearly. He didn't seem to want to be involved in anything. His only purpose was to protect the villagers. On the outsider's side, Heapingan and the other 6 people were considered prestigious bigwigs. They had no intention of getting involved with others, but they sensed danger and began to cooperate with each other. On the official side, 2 agents from the 19th Bureau of the National Security Bureau were missing or unconscious. GLUO and Sukinghan, as newcomers, were not clear about the situation and were just bystanders. They did not think of doing anything extra, but would protect Yizin. On the side of the wild soul, no one knew how long it had been hiding in this village. The location of the ancient tomb was still unknown, and whether there was a treasure was still a question. However, the news had been spread inexplicably, and a bunch of people who were unwilling to be lonely came here. It was simply a perfect feast. It's really a group of demons dancing wildly. When GLUO first received this task, he wanted to cut the Gordian knot and kill the wild soul with absolute power, but now, before the wild soul saw it, he found that the human side was already a little restless. Yes, those devils in human skin are restless. Sukinghan still looked relaxed at this time. She was obviously involved in the situation like GLUO, but she didn't care about anything. The thing that interested her most seemed to be to make fun of GLUO. Kinghan, this old village chief, is not right. GLUO put his cheek to Sukinghan's ear intimately and reminded her quietly. The girl smiled and looked at GLUO, as if to say that he just realized that it was too stupid. GLUO, as a reward, I will tell you a piece of news. What news? 3 months ago, the man who died in the mountains, surnamed G, was the son that the old village chief loved the most. More than a month ago, the little girl who disappeared was the old village chief's favorite granddaughter. Sukinghan spoke in a sweet tone, as if she was saying something love, but this news was like thunder and lightning to GLUO's ears. This old man just lost his son and his granddaughter. For an old man of this age, the death of a young person is undoubtedly a landslide-like blow, which is heartbreaking. GLUO looked at the hunched old man in front of him and felt sorry for him. It seemed that a man with 1 foot in the grave didn't have much to be on guard against. It's really tragic that his son and granddaughter died one after another. Does he hate outsiders for this reason? I don't think so. As for hating outsiders, I think we should start with his daughter-in-law. Sukinghan had looked for the head of the Wangsheng Hall before, but he had checked a lot of information at a very high price, including a lot of miscellaneous information. Sukinghan picked and chose from it and really found a lot of interesting information. GLUO, I told you before that there is a big clan in this village. You still remember it, right? Let me tell you, that big family is the G family. Back then, the entire Maoan village was their land, and everyone was a tenant farmer, a farming and reading family, and a big landlord. Why does the old village chief speak so well? The ancestors of this village have relied on the G family for their livelihood. The slave mentality is written in their blood, and they are very scary. Back then, the G family was almost wiped out during the illness and horse chaos. This old village chief Jiego was one of the people who barely survived back then. The ups and downs and heartbreak he has seen are not what we can imagine. The big mansion just now belongs to the whole family. The houses those people live in are all his family. The land of every household in the village should have been inherited by him. Unfortunately, after the revolution, all of these are gone, and he lived a hard life for a long time. But he is from a farming and reading family, understands the importance of knowledge, and has a flexible mind. In the end, he still became the village chief. In the village, except for the old Wu family, there are few thorns who dare to go against him. Although Sukinghan was talking about the past, her tone was like she was telling an interesting story. It was really a bit bad. GLUO's ear was pressed against the side of her cheek, and the two of them almost hugged each other. No wonder, the secretary surnamed Ki almost licked him on his knees. By the way, what about his daughter-in-law? Why does she hate outsiders? GLUO was completely attracted by the story. He didn't expect that this small Maoan village had such a magnificent story. The old village chief was still a child of a serious family. He with his father as a village chief, his most beloved son, the daughter-in-law he married back then was well-mannered and beautiful. In the surrounding area there are a lot of gossips in it. so I won't tell you first. Sukinghan is still a girl after all. She is not interested in such a bloody story, but now she is talking about business, so naturally she can't go too far. The old village chief sent his other 2 sons away and only kept his favorite youngest son by his side. Because he was spoiled too much, he has some personality problems. But their ancestors were wealthy and had hidden a lot of good things, so they naturally had no shortage of money, so he married a good wife. After 8 or 9 years of marriage, his youngest son and his daughter-in-law were in love, but they only had one daughter, and they had no children since then. The old village chief never had the grandson he had always dreamed of. This old man was a bit futile. He just wanted a son to carry on the family line, but it was strange that his son and daughter-in-law went to the hospital and took medicine, but they just didn't have any children. But, about 3 years ago, a boss seemed to be planning to build a factory in the village, and many workers came to work there. One night, his daughter-in-law went out to buy something, and was raped. At the time, this incident caused quite a big fuss. Anyway, in the end, the factory was not built, and the culprit was never found out, so it was left unresolved. But the most amazing thing is that not many days later, his daughter-in-law became pregnant. Chapter 382, The Injustice of the Deceased. Fuck. No way. Although GLUO knew that the old village chief was not far ahead, and he should lower his voice to avoid reacting, the complex information revealed by Sukinghan still made GLUO couldn't help but shout out. GLUO, do you feel very explosive? Sukinghan's expression at this time was not the kind of smile that was interesting, but a very disdainful sneer. These things happened 3 years ago. When his son found out that his wife was pregnant again, his first thought was to abort the baby. But this feudal old man didn't think so. He wanted to wait until the baby was born, then do a blood test, and then decide what to do from a normal point of view. These are the 2 choices of whether to have a child or not. But in fact, the complex entanglements and desires of human nature have become a mess. The old village chief actually suspected that the child in his daughter-in-law's belly was not his, but he was unwilling to accept it. He thought, what if it was? What if it was another boy? This desire made him want to open this blind box. But his son didn't think so. His son watched his wife's belly grow bigger day by day, and he thought that someone hadn't tricked him, and the other part his bastard was still growing and developing day by day. So he was irritable and uneasy, and coupled with his already bad personality, many things took a sharp turn for the worse, and finally got out of control. The more he felt that he was cuckolded, the more he cared, and eventually it became a demon in his heart, so violence began. Sukinghan's tone at this time has become heavy. This story is not made up, but a fact that can be seen with the naked eye. The entanglement of human nature, the chaos of the family, the hope of the feudal patriarch, and the anxiety and suffering of a woman. Alas, what a sin. GLUO couldn't laugh at this time. He could almost imagine how simple the pregnant woman was, and at that time, the little girl who should have been only 8 or 9 years old must have been very hard. Human nature can't stand the test. The family is broken, the love is distorted, and a tragedy has brewed endless suffering. What happened to that woman in the end? She committed suicide when the fetus was basically formed. When Sukinghan said this, he felt oppressed in his heart. After listening to it, GLUO nodded, but he was also panicked. That woman was a victim through and through. Her originally loving husband turned into a lunatic. She should have a lifetime of happiness, but it was ruined by someone's malice. Of course, there is also this feudal old man. Everyone is a perpetrator, and that woman is innocent. She probably resented the child in her belly, and she wanted to abort her, but the authoritarian head of the family would not allow it, and her husband had to not allow it, so she had no choice. She probably wanted to give birth to the child. After all, it was her child, but she probably couldn't stand it, couldn't stand her husband, couldn't stand this village full of gossip, couldn't stand her life and dignity that were already insulted. So, she chose to die, and only by choosing death could she end it all. Then what? GLUO was silent for a long time, and finally asked the whole thing, which was very important, but no longer important. Whose child is that? I don't know. I didn't test it, because the old village chief didn't allow it. Su King-hun looked at the figure in front of him with contempt and felt deeply that the woman was not worth it. Gluo's breathing stagnated when he heard this answer. Normally, since this child is the key, then after the death of that poor woman, everyone should give her, the victim, a clear name. She is innocent. Innocent from the beginning to the end. Everyone is the perpetrator, and she is the only victim. After her death, everyone should give her respect and a memorial ceremony for her death. Whose child is this child? We should find out. If the child is really the rapist, then it was the old village chief who insisted on giving birth to the child who forced the poor woman to death. If the child is really her husband's, then her husband is a complete abuser. He forced his wife to death, and also lost his child. As the direct perpetrator, even if he escaped legal punishment for various reasons, his inner torment and regret should not fade away. The law of heaven is reincarnation. The dead are silent, and the living should redress their grievances. However, this old village chief, in order to escape the notoriety of his doomed daughter-in-law, or in other words, he deliberately let the truth flow into the wilderness, so that his conscience, which has been eaten by dogs, can be at ease. How the dead are dead, and the living should live well for themselves. Because the truth hurts people, it should be concealed. The result of Skradinga's theory made the old man feel at ease, and his son also felt at ease. Only that woman died sadly, sighed, and died in a heartbreaking way. There is no such reason in this world. Gluo almost gritted his teeth and said it. It was really difficult for him to forgive such an injustice. People were forced to death, so at least she could be vindicated. Gluo, there is really no such reason in this world, but this is a reality. Although Su King-hun was also very angry, she remained rational. 3 years had passed, and no one could do anything. The dead were dead, and the living were still alive. That poor woman jumped into the river and committed suicide. Her body was buried on the hill in the south. Her daughter, Ji Si-wen, would often go to see it. Sat. Gluo never expected that everything would hide so much haze. This old village chief who had the final say in the village forced his daughter-in-law to death 3 years ago. 3 months ago, his son also died at the hands of the wild soul. More than a month ago, his granddaughter also died, and the body was missing. King Han, is it possible that the woman is the wild soul that caused all this? Theoretically, it's unlikely. I checked 3 years ago, when the woman died, there were no abnormal deaths of people and animals in the village. You know, the survival and growth of the wild soul requires the soul. Without the soul for the wild soul to eat, the newborn wild soul will die soon. Su King-hun is a professional after all. She pays attention to this aspect, so she checked it very clearly. But in the end, the results of repeated comparisons proved that her conjecture was indeed redundant. The newborn wild soul has no intelligence at all. It will only wander around the place where it was born, looking for living creatures, killing and then devouring souls. In any way, the woman was buried on the hill in the south. The only place where living people and livestock can be found is Maoan village. After all, Maoan village is surrounded by wilderness, and the nearest place with people has to take a few hours of driving. It is really too far. Chapter 383, Ji Si-wen. Is that so? Gluo even felt a pity after listening to Su King-hun's analysis. The wild souls that eat human souls are the enemies of mankind. Gluo certainly doesn't have any good feelings towards them, but this time, after listening to the woman's suffering, he really wanted her to become a wild soul and then take revenge. What a pity. This world is neither gentle nor beautiful. It's the wheel of fate. This village chief with a stubborn temper, who likes to be arbitrary in everything. His son was killed by a wild soul not long ago, and his granddaughter also died. Su King-hun suddenly touched his cheek and rubbed it on the tip of Gluo's nose. Gluo turned his head and looked at the tenderness in the girl's eyes. His stiff expression also relaxed. King Han, so, the son and granddaughter of the old village chief were killed by the wild spirits when they went to pay tribute to his daughter-in-law? It's possible. Su King-hun frowned when he asked this question. Obviously, all the information did not point to this. After the poor woman died, her husband became more and more abnormal, as if he had a mental illness, and often became inexplicably manic and crazy. He never went to his wife's grave to pay tribute, and he didn't even dare to go into the mountains. The reason he went into the mountains that day seemed to be, he drank some wine, then got sick, and ran to the mountains. But her daughter often went to her grave to pay tribute, sometimes even playing all day, and going back very late. Because of this, her father often scolded her, but it seemed that he never beat her, because her grandfather would stop her. Sukinghan also sighed at the experience of the little girl, but everything was over, and she could not change anything. In the memory of the little girl, her family before the age of 8 was as beautiful as heaven. But then things suddenly took a turn for the worse, and she fell into a dark hell. Her father beat and scolded her mother committed suicide, and her father often went crazy. These things are too hurtful for a child. Ji Siwon is only 12 years old this year, and in the 6th grade. She seems to have excellent academic performance, and is often praised by teachers at school. But she seems to have a gloomy personality. She doesn't like to talk, and doesn't like to play with other children. She is alone every day, and likes to go into the mountains, and stay by her mother's grave. When she returns home, she and her father don't have any warmth at all. Instead, she is often scolded, but Ji Siwon has a good relationship with her grandfather. Every day when she goes into the mountains, the old village chief will prepare something for her to eat, and she has never lacked new clothes and snacks. Ji Siwon is not the worst after all. At least she still has a grandfather who dotes on her. Other children may gossip about her behind her back, but no one dares to bully her. Although Sukinghan hated what the old village chief did, she also admitted that he was good in some aspects. At least, he was very good to his granddaughter, and his prestige in the village was also due to his fairness, and he made a lot of contributions to the village. At least in terms of being a human being, he might have some stains, but he didn't make any particularly big mistakes. Kinghan, if that's the case, then that wild soul is in the surrounding mountains? Well, that's very likely. GLUO, what's wrong with you? Nothing. I just always feel that that woman should have become a wild soul. GLUO's feeling was not supported by any evidence. He suspected that he felt that the woman was too pitiful, and hoped that she could complete her revenge. Forget it. If that woman really became a wild soul, it would be too sad if she killed her husband and her daughter. That's true. Sukinghan nodded thoughtfully, then pursed her lips and said nothing. GLUO held her hand, his heart in a mess, and he had no desire to speak. At this time, the three of them had returned to the clinic. As usual, the door of the clinic was locked. After the old village chief knocked on the door, Qiu Karo, the young nurse, ran down to open the door. Village chief, how is old Wu's family? Is everything okay? No big deal, it's all resolved. The old village chief obviously didn't intend to tell Qiu Karo the truth. The girl was also easy to fool, and actually believed it. Afterwards, GLUO and Sukinghan walked to the door. The old village chief said a few words of advice to the two of them, and then left leisurely. GLUO turned his head and watched the old man disappear in the night. He felt a suffocation in his heart, unable to spit it out or swallow it. After all, the past was someone else's family affair. He had no right to interfere, nor did he want to interfere. GLUO, Sukinghan. Coming quickly, it's so cold outside. Qiu Karo still had an optimistic attitude. GLUO and Sukinghan entered the house and put down their umbrellas. Then Qiu Karo locked the door and pulled Sukinghan upstairs. Qiu Karo, why is the door of the clinic always locked? Isn't it very inconvenient for patients to come? This is what the village chief ordered. If there are outsiders in the village, we must lock the door. There are only me and Dr. Luo in our clinic, 2 women. It's not safe. Qiu Karo obviously likes talking to Sukinghan very much. Everyone has a love of beauty. Qiu Karo may envy Sukinghan, a fairy-like figure, but she is more of a yearning. GLUO followed the two of them and checked around with a flashlight. He didn't quite trust the health center's protective measures. Now he has calculated where the enemy can easily break in. Of course, at least for the time being, GLUO's preparations are useless. The three of them went upstairs. Luo Fison was taking care of Yizin. The sleeping girl finally stopped frowning, but there was no sign of waking up. GLUO, Sukinghan, you are back. Thank you for your hard work. Luo Fison got up from the chair and poured 2 glasses of water for Luo and Sukinghan. Luo sat down and thanked them. When he looked up, he found that the clothes he and Sukinghan had changed before had been washed, dried, and hung in front of the window. Dr. Luo, thank you for your help in washing our clothes. No problem, there's a washing machine. Luo Fison's mood had calmed down, but she seemed a little sleepy after staying up for who knows how long. Dr. Luo, where should Luo and I sleep today? Sukinghan's clothes, which had just been changed, were wet again. She picked up the backpack next to her and found another set of clothes. You and Luo, you can go anywhere. The wards on the first floor are all empty. Luo Fison's voice was a little low, as if she was hesitating about something. She looked at Luo and Sukinghan who were packing their backpacks and said everything. Sukinghan, Luo, you should also sleep on the second floor today. Qiu Kyo and I are a little scared. Okay, let's sleep together. Sukinghan looked at Luo Fison, who looked uneasy, and nodded very readily. There were so many beds in the ward, and there were curtains, so it was not inconvenient. Since the accommodation arrangements had been made and everyone was tired, the subsequent activities would definitely revolve around sleeping. Chapter 384, Under the Mountain. There were many mattresses in the hospital. Qiu Kyo wanted to get a few more quilts, but Sukinghan refused. She explained very straightforwardly, so straightforward that Qiu Kyo blushed. Luo and I only need 1 quilt. I have a cold body, and I can only sleep with him comfortably. In the heavy rain that covered the sky, several people in the ward fell asleep peacefully. Luo hugged Sukinghan's slightly cold body, and after being confused for a while, he slowly fell asleep. Anger, resentment, and pain. In the hazy darkness, the overwhelming negative emotions drowned Luo. The remaining reason told Luo that he was in a dream, but those emotions were so real that they seemed to come from the heart. So, like a drowned dead person, Luo suddenly opened his eyes. What he saw was a quiet dusk. The wasteland in the suburbs looked full of vitality. Ankle-high weeds grew wantonly, spreading all the way from the undulating and sunken flatland to a small hill at the end of his sight. In the distance, the sunset burned into a sea of fire, and the outline of the city could be vaguely seen. The sound of high-rise buildings had already gone silent, and nothing in the suburbs was disturbed. Tap, tap, tap. However, in this world, where the wind had stopped, a series of footsteps gradually approached. Luo stood in place, looking at the wish, and saw a figure gradually approaching. Judging from his appearance alone, he was a young man with shifty eyebrows and rat eyes, and he couldn't give people a good impression. However, at this time, all the miscellaneous auras on him disappeared, replaced by a kind of weirdness and horror. Because, at this moment, he was as slow as a zombie, and every step he took was quite strenuous. He bent his waist, lowered his head, and pulled a huge trolley case in his hand, looking like he had exhausted all his strength. The dark blue trolley case was very large, and it could almost fit a person perfectly, but at this time, I don't know what was in it, and it actually bulged the sides of the box, like a fat man who was full of food. The young man was obviously weak. He dragged the box forward like a weak old ox. His messy hair swung around as he swayed, and his strange eyes could be vaguely seen. At this time, his eyes no longer had pupils and whites, but were completely blue-purple, as deep as the night. Tap, tap, tap. The young man, who was controlled by something, walked forward without stopping. Luo watched him walk by, and followed him silently. In the weird atmosphere, time passed slowly, and the few chaotic bird calls disappeared completely. It was obviously a hill with lush vegetation, but at this time, it seemed silent and terrifying. The sun soon fell into the horizon, and the dim moonlight sprinkled down, and everything in the woods was shadowy. In this darkness where it was difficult to see anything, the young man still staggered forward, and every step seemed to use up all his strength. Ding 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 ding. The ringing sound of the mobile phone came from the pocket of the young man. The volume was turned up to the maximum, but the young man was unaware of it, and just staggered forward. After a long while, it was not known whether the mobile phone was out of power or the other party finally gave up. The ringing sound disappeared, and the forest fell into silence again. Luo followed the young man silently. He knew that he was dreaming, and that he was like a ghost without a plank. He could do nothing but watch. So Gluo did not struggle. He just walked quietly behind him. The nameless hill was not very high, and the vegetation on it was a little sparse. Gluo had obviously never been here, but walking on this road, Gluo felt inexplicably familiar. It was as if, a long time ago, he had walked here before. Just that one time, it was unforgettable, and could never be forgotten. This road was long and quiet. The young man in front of Gluo walked from dusk to late at night, and finally reached the top of the mountain. Gluo, who had followed all the way, also began to get tired. Of course, it might not be tiredness, but drowsiness and confusion. He clearly did nothing, but he felt so tired that he wanted to fall down and let the darkness swallow him. Fortunately, Gluo held back. He forced himself to cheer up and stood on the empty mountain top, facing the young man who had been controlled. The sound of the zipper of the suitcase rang out, and the whole backpack was slowly opened, revealing the heavy object inside. It was a huge purple blue gem. The whole body was oval, about 1.6 meters high, and the arc of the downward slide was not abrupt, but rather very round. In the dim night, the gem flickered with stars in the sky, as beautiful as the vast night sky. However, at this time, the young man was obviously unable to appreciate this beauty. He slowly lifted the gem, carried it on his shoulders, and then placed it in the center of the mountain top. In the windless and silent night, the moonlight was like a light white frost. Gluo stood at a certain angle, as if he had a meaning in mind, and squatted down. Thus, Gluo was able to see the moonlight through the gemstone, and in this dim light, Gluo saw the dark shadow in the center of the gemstone. Without thinking, an answer instantly appeared in Gluo's mind, and it was even as if someone was telling him the answer he had long forgotten. The remains of a certain existence are sealed in this gemstone. A long time ago, he had fought a war to the death with an existence outside the world. He won, and after paying an unimaginable huge price, he won. He smashed her body, along with her power, and sealed the largest piece of it, completely covering up the breath with a white tree. Then, he tore her soul into two halves, and sealed the good half in his own sea of consciousness, which he personally guarded. The other half was sealed in the suburbs of Changlin City, and was guarded by a girl named Jiang Yu. That day, she swore to him that she would guard this huge soul that could not be destroyed, and fight to the death. Even if she died one day, she would pass her power to her successor, who would continue to protect it. This is a vow, and also a promise. In his chaotic thoughts, Gluo suddenly thought of something. He resisted so that his consciousness would not be swallowed by the darkness. He wanted to stop everything in front of him, but no one could stop it. Anger, resentment, and pain, negative emotions like a raging torrent burst out of the mountain. The soil and rocks on the top of the mountain began to collapse, and an unmeasurable abyss was forming. The huge purple-blue crystal fell with the soil and rocks, falling into the extremely deep darkness. Gluo, the time we meet is approaching. It's almost there. It's almost there. Your death is coming. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385. Looking back. The nightmare tracing, the resentment that seemed to be real, pierced into Gluo's soul like a sharp blade. He trembled in his deep sleep and woke up suddenly. Gluo looked at the unfamiliar ceiling with rapid breathing. His eyes were wide open to the limit, and there was fear and sadness in his eyes. Jiang Yu, is your injury already so serious? Huh? Gluo, what are you talking about? Su Qinghan was woken up by Gluo in a daze. She opened her eyes, looked at Gluo who was sweating profusely, and raised her hand to touch his forehead. Gluo, what's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? Yeah, I had a nightmare. Gluo raised his hand to support his forehead, feeling inexplicably irritated. He seemed to remember something, and seemed to have experienced something. Some messy things surged in his consciousness, making it impossible for him to concentrate. That feeling was like the memories that were lost long ago suddenly poured into his brain, and these memories were mixed with his original memories, making it a mess, and it was impossible to sort them out. GLUO tried to recall something, but what he remembered were all a bunch of scattered fragments, which were mixed together, and made him irritated. The fragment of drinking milk at the age of 1, biting toys at the age of 2, and eating marshmallows at the age of 3. The fragment of chasing dogs at the age of 4, breaking walls at the age of 5, and flying into the sky at the age of 6. The fragment of the soul leaving the body at the age of 7, the fragment of telepathy at the age of 8, and the fragment of resurrecting the dead at the age of 9. The fragment of detonating volcanoes at the age of 10, the judgment of triggering earthquakes at the age of 11, and the fragment of changing the weather at the age of 12. The fragment of breaking space at the age of 13, the fragment of intercepting meteorites at the age of 14, and the fragment of looking for the past at the age of 15. It was just a thought. What GLUO recalled were all kinds of trivial memories of his 24 years. They were mixed together and were broken into juice-like existence. Trying to find a fruit from it and eat it was as outrageous as quantum wave speed reading. GLUO, are you okay? Sukinghan sat up from GLUO's arms at this time and handed the water on the table to GLUO. GLUO drank a little water, but his breathing was still very rapid. Kinghan, don't bother, I'm fine. I'm fine too. Sukinghan looked at GLUO's reluctant expression, feeling a little resentful. The girl got off the bed, found a towel, wiped GLUO's sweat, and then helped him sit up. Generally speaking, the body of an evolver is far superior to that of an ordinary person, and GLUO, who is at the peak of the second Black Iron stage, should not be so weak. But at this time, for some reason, GLUO's face was terribly pale, and the whole person seemed to be haunted by a nightmare, and he couldn't think in an orderly manner at all. Kinghan, I'm fine, don't worry. GLUO coughed a few times. Although he tried to make an expression that he was fine, Sukinghan still frowned and didn't believe it at all. GLUO, what happened? I had a nightmare. I seem to have forgotten a lot. Now I remember, but it's very confusing, cumbersome. GLUO spoke a little fast, and the content was even very confusing. Sukinghan knew that he had asked the wrong question, so he raised his hand to cover GLUO's mouth, signaling him not to say anything. GLUO, now, calm down and don't think about anything. You may be affected by the wild soul. It's okay, it's okay. Sukinghan picked up the towel next to her and carefully wiped GLUO's sweat. Then she got out of bed, poured hot water from the thermos, washed the towel, and then returned to the window. GLUO, it's okay, I'm by your side, it's okay. Sukinghan wiped GLUO's face with a hot towel. Under her comfort, GLUO no longer tried to recall the past, didn't think about anything, and slowly calmed down. Ha. GLUO felt like he had a high fever, and the whole person was dizzy. Although his consciousness was a little confused, an urgent sense of crisis always lingered in his heart. It was as if his subconscious was reminding him that there was something extremely dangerous. It was coming. She was coming. GLUO was now more than hundreds of kilometers away from Changlin City, but in his subconscious, there was a voice constantly reminding him that she was coming. Kinghan, hurry, go, she's coming. GLUO, who's coming? Sukinghan held GLUO's hand and tried to comfort him. GLUO's thoughts were so confused that it was difficult to describe it accurately. She's coming. In a trance, GLUO's voice suddenly became particularly deep. He suddenly widened his eyes, and the source power in his body was suddenly released, turning his dark eyes into vertical pupils. Wrapped in the star purple source power, GLUO's pupils turned into dragon-like vertical pupils, and the bright light flickered in his pupils, like a deep abyss. Crossing Yan is waking up. GLUO slowly raised his hand. On the back of his right hand, an abstract sword-shaped pattern was bright and dark, like the rhythm of a sleeping giant beast. More soul essence, the nearest wild soul. GLUO was like a hungry beast, passively longing for the soul crystal of the wild soul. Because of the chain involvement of a half-body, Crossing Yan, who had merged with the Skyblade, was also trying to wake up. And she needs a lot of soul energy. GLUO, do you need the soul crystal of the wild soul? Sukinghan naturally knew what soul essence was. It was the physical form of soul energy after high concentration aggregation. It was initially gaseous, high concentration was liquid, and the extreme state was solidified crystal. That is, the soul crystal of the wild soul. Yes, I need it. Gluo seemed to be drowsy, and the whole person was a little hazy. Sukinghan looked at Gluo distressedly and finally made up his mind. Sukinghan, Gluo, what happened? On the other side, Luo Fizan didn't seem to sleep deeply. Although Sukinghan had already lightened his movements, Gluo's voice still woke her up. It's Gluo. He seems to have been attacked by the wild soul. Sukinghan didn't know what happened to Gluo, but in this case, it was undoubtedly the best choice to blame the wild soul. She got off the bed, put on her shoes, and pulled open the curtains around her. Luo Fizan also came over at this time. She looked at Gluo's state and was a little unsure of the situation, so she didn't dare to contact Gluo. Sukinghan, Gluo, is he okay? He's not feeling well. I'm going to go out for a while and will be back soon. Please help me keep an eye on him. Sukinghan was not a talkative person. Since he knew about Gluo's soul crystal, he could just bring him a piece and see how it works. If it really works, he could heal him in that direction. Gluo, wait for me. I'll be back soon. In the dim candlelight, Sukinghan kissed Gluo's forehead lightly, then turned and walked into the darkness. Chapter 386, Desire. Wow, in the pouring rain, Sukinghan was just wearing ordinary casual clothes, and she didn't even take an umbrella, and walked out of the clinic. The ice blue mist lingered around her, which was completely different from Gluo's gorgeousness. The evolvers of the second black iron rank could only release their source power. At most, the source power would flow on the surface of the skin, serving as a perfect protective layer. However, the evolvers of the 3 blue steel rank and above could already release their source power. That kind of posture was like the halo and auspicious clouds around the immortals in myths and legends, with a charm that transcended the mortal world. Sukinghan had murderous intent in her heart, and the temperature of the frost source power also became extremely terrifying. The overwhelming rainstorm fell 10 meters away from Sukinghan, and instantly turned into ice crystals, which fell to the ground with a crisp sound. The water surface under Sukinghan's feet also instantly turned into solid ice. Her footsteps on the ice did not slip at all, but were as stable as walking on flat ground. At this time, because of the use of the source power, Sukinghan's pupils also lit up with a light blue glow. Her eyes patrolled the surroundings. After confirming that there was no threat, her figure disappeared in an instant. Although Gluo could no longer feel her original talent when he contacted Sukinghan, after she woke up, the loss of her previous original talent did not mean that Sukinghan became weaker. It can even be said that Sukinghan became stronger, so strong that Gluo could not imagine it at all, because he had never imagined a possibility. Return could not take away Sukinghan's original talent, not because Sukinghan did not have it, but because he could not take it at all. Except for Sukinghan, no one could know what level she had reached, because from the village to the hill, a distance of 2 or 3 kilometers, she only needed a breath to reach it, which was comparable to flashing. This speed of movement, which was beyond common sense, was even faster than the speed of a bullet, and relying on the effect of the source power on the air, the wind resistance was almost non-existent, and the movement along the way did not bring up any wind flow, just like a ghost. In the rainstorm-sealed forest, sporadic sounds suddenly rang out. Sukinghan stood there, with no trace of anxiety in her eyes, as if she had already gotten what she wanted. Then, there was a sound of claws hitting the ground. Sukinghan turned her head and saw a group of frost-white wolves. The fur of these wolves was completely snow-white, their pupils had turned into a clear blue color of frost, and their claws were as bright as ice crystals, which looked extremely beautiful. The giant wolf in the lead was larger than an average adult rhino. Even if it lowered its body, it was still taller than Sukinghan. Behind the leader, dozens of wolf shadows were as big as old oxen. The wolves stopped quietly in place, like the people meeting the king. The rain fell and turned into ice beads around the wolves. Their breath was frosty and cold, directly dyeing the grass on the ground white, and even freezing it. You did a good job. Sukinghan's voice seemed a little ethereal at this time. She stretched out her hand, and the wolf leader took 2 steps forward, lowered his head, and let Sukinghan take away a crystal from the fur on his neck. Now, children, go. Use the surrounding mountains as a boundary, and start a blockade. Do not allow people and animals to approach. Give a warning first, and those who trespass again will be killed. Sukinghan's voice sounded emotionless, but the leader whimpered with joy, and then the wolf pack retreated and started running in the blink of an eye. This world cannot perish yet. Sukinghan raised her head. Her ice blue pupils looked at the dark clouds. Her face was neither happy nor sad, as if all this was just normal. No matter what, hold on for another 100 years, at least. Let Gluo live out his life. Sukinghan's voice became erratic again, and she took a step forward. The source power around her seemed to boost her actions, making her speed as fast as thunder. At the same time, Gluo in the hospital became more and more excited. The abstract sword-shaped pattern on the back of his hand began to light up. Although the purple-blue light was dim, it was difficult to look away. Kyuukawa was also awakened by Gluo's mumbling. She got out of bed and ran over. She was helpless in the face of Gluo's situation. Dr. Luo, what's wrong with Gluo? I don't know. It should be that monster. Luo Fisen didn't know what to do. She wanted to wipe Gluo's forehead with a towel, but the energy layer flowing around Gluo blocked everything. Fortunately, Gluo didn't seem to have the consciousness to attack, so he just simply blocked it, and didn't hurt Luo Fisen. But looking at Gluo's restless expression, Luo Fisen and Kyuukawa were already very uneasy. Fortunately, Sukinghan came back soon. Sukinghan, do you have any way to save Gluo? Kyuukawa rushed over immediately when she saw Sukinghan coming in. But for some reason, Sukinghan was no different from before, but at this time, she was inexplicably scared when he stood in front of her. It's okay, Gluo will be fine. I have found the soul crystal. Sukinghan walked to the window and put the mango-sized crystal in his hand into Gluo's right palm. This is a 3 blue steel level wild soul, and it is also the strongest level wild soul that her followers can find. A higher existence is probably the initiator of all this. Sukinghan doesn't want to confront it yet. HAA. Gluo closed his eyes, as if taking a nap or a light sleep. He felt the soul crystal in his hand and slowly opened his eyes. The inhuman vertical pupils were bright for a moment. Click. The next moment, Gluo's right hand squeezed hard, and the soul crystal, which was much harder than steel, shattered directly. The grey-black soul burst like smoke, and was then sucked up by Gluo's right hand without a trace. That feeling was like a long drought in the sweet dew. The sleeping heaven's blade got nutrients, and relieved the uncontrollable hunger and thirst. So, Gluo finally regained his sanity. Kinghan, what's wrong with me? Gluo felt that his head was in a daze. He reached out and held Sukinghan's palm, as if he had someone to rely on, and breathed a sigh of relief. I seem to have had a long nightmare. I woke up, but I couldn't wake up. It's okay, Gluo, you seem to be lacking in nutrition. Sukinghan breathed a sigh of relief after seeing Gluo wake up. As long as a means of treatment is found, everything will be fine. Gluo is obviously lacking soul source power now, so as long as the wild soul is killed, and he absorbs the soul crystal, everything will be fine. And now, in Sukinghan's impression, there is a certain existence that resides nearby, which is the perfect supplement for Gluo. As long as he killed her, Gluo would definitely not be lacking in soul power. Because she was too big. So big that she would endanger the world. Chapter 387, Under the Umbrella. Just now, I seem to have seen that wild soul. Gluo lay on the bed, slowly gathering the source power on his body. He turned over his palm, looked at the lines on the back of his hand, and slowly smiled. Crossing Yan had already merged with the heavenly blade in his body. In order to wake up, Crossing Yan needed a lot of soul source power. This desire became the best means to search for the wild soul. Who did you see? Sukinghan didn't care about anyone except Gluo now. Her eyelids drooped, and her eyes were full of tenderness. I don't know, so I want to go and see. Gluo didn't know what he was thinking, or he was so stunned. When his mind was confused just now, he felt the existence behind all this, so he wanted to confirm it. Okay, I'll accompany you. Sukinghan bent down and took out shoes for Gluo. The shoes that were originally soaked had been drained by Sukinghan with source power at some point. She carefully padded the insoles for Gluo, not caring about the mud on them at all. I feel like I've just recovered from a serious illness. Gluo got out of bed and put on his shoes. His head was still a little dizzy. He smiled at Luo Fizin and Qiu Karo, looking a little embarrassed. Dr. Luo, can you take me to the mountain in the south to see where Ji Suan's mother is buried? Yes. Luo Fizin also felt that Gluo was a little different now. Of course, she didn't want to go out, but she couldn't refuse. Dr. Luo, you don't know the exact location, but I know. I'll take you there. Qiu Karo suddenly jumped out at this time, which was so abrupt that no one expected it, but looking at her expression, it was obvious that she didn't dare to stay in the hospital alone. That's great, let's go together. Luo Fizin glanced at Yizin, who was still in a coma, feeling a little uneasy. Everyone had left, and she was fine here alone. Dr. Luo, don't worry, Yizin is in a coma now, which is a good thing. Sukinghan poured Gluo another glass of water at this time. After Gluo drank it, she put on his coat again, taking care of him in every possible way. After Sukinghan's assurance, Luo Fizin felt relieved. She and Qiu Karo found their coats and put them on, then followed Gluo downstairs. Do you want to take a shovel? Gluo took the flashlight on the table and was about to get an umbrella, but was stopped by Sukinghan. No need to take anything. Sukinghan looked at Gluo with a lingering smile, with a slight tear in her eyes. She held Gluo's hand and pulled him into the rain while he was unaware. In the heavy rain, Sukinghan stretched out her right hand, and the mist of source power rose. Under her control, the raindrops condensed together like a blooming bud and condensed into an umbrella made of ice crystals. Gluo, how is it? Does it look good? It looks good. Gluo looked at the umbrella, then turned his head to look at Sukinghan, who was smiling sweetly, and suddenly felt an indescribable sadness in his heart. Sukinghan was obviously by his side, but in a trance. He had the illusion that she was gradually moving away. It was as if the intersection of the two people had ended, and the extension after that was in the wind and snow. The release of the source power of the blue steel level is good, and the frost source power is also very good. Gluo actually didn't know what to say. Sukinghan nodded and was speechless. At this time, Luo Fizin and Qiu Karo had already put on their raincoats. They were wearing boots and holding flashlights, and their images looked a bit miserable. Let's go. Qiu Karo already felt that the atmosphere was not right, but she still tried to hold on to her vitality, dragging Luo Fizin and walking in front of Gluo and the others. The heavy rain had been falling for nearly a day. In the villages and towns that had poor drainage, the water had already touched the ankles and was still rising. It was late at night, and there was no noise around except the sound of rain. Qiu Karo and Luo Fizin pulled each other and left the town step by step, walking towards the hills in the south. Behind them, Gluo and Sukinghan held hands and held a large umbrella of ice crystals. Sukinghan did not release the source of power deliberately, so the cold air was around them, and there were still raindrops in the distance. Kinghan, I just had a very distant dream in my sleep. I seem to remember a lot of things. What did you remember? Sukinghan walked beside Gluo, feeling calm and peaceful. She even had a kind of expectation in her heart. It would be great if this road could be extended infinitely and never end. Kinghan, when I was young, I might be a very powerful existence. I was probably the first evolver. Gluo used the word existence to describe himself because some fragments in his memories were simply not something that humans, or even ordinary evolvers, could achieve. Kinghan, I don't know how to describe it to you, but when I was a child, I was probably the strongest person in the world, and it's still the same even now. I don't have any memory of my parents. I only remember that I had an adoptive mother. She was very good to me, taught me how to use my strength, taught me what I should do, taught me the meaning of my birth. But one day, she left in a hurry. She had her own mission, her own destiny. Because my memory is tattered, I can't even remember what she looked like, but I still remember that when she left, she said to me, "You must protect this world well." Gluo can now recall the past in bits and pieces. Before, he seemed to have experienced too much suffering, and after having a new life, he threw everything behind his head and didn't want to think about it. But now, the threat of the past is approaching, and his subconscious mind forces him to remember the past. Gluo, do you want to protect this world? Sukinghan didn't expect that Gluo would say such a big goal when he opened his mouth, but when she turned her head, she saw from Gluo's expression that it was hard to miss. No, it's not that I want to, but the meaning of my birth is to protect this world. Gluo stretched out his palm and caught a fallen ice bead in his hand, then squeezed it with his fingers and crushed it into pieces. However, I'm not the same person as before. I have lost that power, so naturally, I have also lost that responsibility, right? Of course, the greater the power, the greater the responsibility. If you don't have that power, you naturally don't have that responsibility. Sukinghan wanted to answer Gluo with a smile, but as she spoke, her eyes turned red. She looked at Gluo with a stubborn look. Gluo, the past is over. You can't live in those memories. You have to look forward and stand up. Yes, haha yes, I can't escape. Chapter 388, Digging a Grave. Gluo actually has a serious sense of disconnection from his past. He didn't even go to college. He was a hard-working worker, but he suddenly became incompetent when he was a child. It was really weird. However, Gluo finally had a clue of what happened 10 years ago. Sukinghan, how old were you 10 years ago? 10 years ago, I was 9 years old. Where were you at that time? At that time, my parents hadn't had any accidents yet and were still living in Zhejiang City. I still remember that at that time, there was a very big apricot tree downstairs from my house. My father would climb up and pick apricots in autumn. When Sukinghan was adopted by Li Ziran, she had just lost her family. She was alone, lonely, and indifferent. If it weren't for Mu Yingluo, she would definitely not be who she is now. If it weren't for the earthquake 10 years ago, I would be in college now. I was a very good student when I was a child, and I could have studied abroad. Sukinghan can now face the grief brought by the disaster calmly. Things like natural disasters are beyond the reach of human beings, and hatred and resentment are meaningless. Gluo, I used to be very happy then. Do you still remember the scene at that time? Gluo looked at Sukinghan's nostalgic expression, and there was an indescribable emotion in his heart. Too many things stuck in his heart, and were difficult to move away. Remember, there was a meteor shower that day. At night, the stars in the sky exploded, and countless tiny meteors scattered like a shimmering rain curtain. Then, the earth shook, and the whole city seemed to be crying. It was just like the end of the world. Sukinghan was talking, and suddenly felt a little strange. The earthquake that year affected almost half of the country. Gluo was in Changlin City, so there was no reason for him not to know about it. Why did he seem to have no memory at all? So, that day, you remember it so clearly. Gluo reached out and wiped his cheek and couldn't even think of words to continue the topic. He just held Sukinghan's hand, slowly increasing his strength, and didn't want to let go. Gluo, what's wrong with you? No, I just feel that this rain is really endless. Gluo has even begun to avoid the previous topic. Sukinghan saw Gluo's intention and stopped talking about what happened 10 years ago. Gluo, to be honest, I have been traveling all over the country for so many years, but I have never seen a wild spirit that can change the weather. It is simply amazing to be able to change the weather like this. It is indeed amazing, but I feel that the wild spirit that can create such heavy rain must have a deep obsession with water. Do you think it was drowned? The daughter-in-law of the old village chief. This requires evidence. Aren't I taking you to see the evidence now? Gluo is somewhat certain about the result. Anyway, after listening to Sukinghan's story, he has an inexplicable premonition in his heart. Then I look forward to it. Sukinghan is a more rational person. She feels that her judgment based on evidence will not be wrong. If the dead 3 years ago really turned into a wild spirit, then Maoan village would definitely have been massacred long ago. Gluo. Sukinghan. We are here. In a sparse woodland, Qiu Kaiu and Luo Fizin in front had stopped where they were. There was a grave next to them. There was no tombstone or even a wooden sign. Because no one had come to visit the grave recently, and spring was the season of lush grass and flying birds, a lot of weeds had grown on the grave, and each one was quite thriving. Gluo, what evidence are you looking for? Sukinhan and Gluo walked to the grave. Gluo's flashlight looked around the grave and finally stopped at the side. Sukinhan, do me a favor. What for? Make a shovel with ice crystals. Huh. Sukinhan finally understood now. No wonder Gluo asked whether he wanted to take a shovel before setting off. It turned out that he was planning to dig a grave. On the other side, Qiu Kaiu and Luo Fizin were also frightened by Gluo's idea. The person had been dead for 3 years. Why did he have to dig a grave? Pregnant women, drowning, resentment. This is definitely a configuration of evil spirits. They have died miserably enough, but they are still disturbed after death. Is this appropriate? Don't worry, make me a nice shovel. Gluo clapped his hands and urged without caring about that. Sukinhan couldn't do anything about him, so he could only make a nice shovel and throw it to Gluo. Hiss, it's so cold. Gluo held the ice creation with both hands, and his fingers were stinging from the cold. He didn't recover until he released the source of power. Then, under the watchful eyes of Sukinhan and the other two, Gluo began to dig the grave shovel by shovel. He had great strength, and each shovel was full of soil, and he dug very quickly. Compared to Sukinhan, who was not afraid of ghosts and gods, Qiu Kaiu and Luo Fizin were scared at this time, especially Qiu Kaiu, who was young and not very courageous. In addition, her clothes were wet by the rain. At this time, standing in the heavy rain, her teeth were chattering like fried beans. Gluo, the wild soul is a monster constructed by the soul and has nothing to do with the corpse. In order to avoid being thrown by the mud and water, Sukinhan went back to the wrong position. When Gluo heard her words, he not only did not hesitate, but dug more vigorously. Kinghan, my intuition tells me that this wild soul is special. While Gluo was talking, he dug down hard, and with a click, he seemed to have poked some wood. I dug up the coffin. Gluo signaled Sukinhan to light up the light, and then quickly pushed away the mud, exposing the entire wooden coffin to the air. Huh. Sukinhan took 2 steps to the coffin and sniffed, but did not smell the rotten smell she imagined. Gluo, it doesn't seem to smell like a corpse. It's not seeming, it's really. Gluo used an ice shovel to shovel, and directly broke one side of the coffin board. Then he flipped it over suddenly, and the entire coffin lid flew out. Then, 3 lights gathered together, and in the crackling rain, the coffin was indeed empty. Just as I expected. Gluo poked the ice shovel in his hand into the ground, turned around and walked to Sukinhan. The girl bent down slightly and carefully checked the clues. Gluo, there is no trace of a corpse in the coffin. The corpse should have been dug up shortly after the burial. Sukinhan frowned and kept thinking about the various possibilities. She already had a lot of evidence and even guessed that she had completed more than half of it. Now, in connection with the clues in front of her, she felt that she was very close to the truth. Gluo, I think you are right. That desolate soul is indeed. Sukinhan was about to say the original name of the desolate soul, but suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the sparse woodland. If it was a heavy rain before, then at this time, around the entire cemetery, it was really raining like a bucket, and the raindrops were connected together, even making it impossible to see anything. Damn it. Chapter 389, Female Ghost. In the violent wind and rain, the sound of resentment came through the forest. Gluo wiped his face and barely opened his eyes. At this moment, standing next to him was a terrifying ghost. The woman who died tragically that year, standing next to Gluo, covered in blood, was soaked all over, with resentment and hideousness on her face, so terrifying that it made people's hair stand on end. Faced with such a terrifying scene, even though Gluo was an evolver, he was frightened, and his blood rushed instantly. He instantly burst out his source power, and swung at the ghost with all his strength. However, the terrifying female ghost was also very fast. She directly avoided Gluo and grabbed his wrist in an instant. GLUO. What's wrong with you? Why are you attacking me? Sukinghan? GLUO was originally planning to struggle, but in the blink of an eye, the terrifying female ghost had disappeared, replaced by Sukinghan, who looked worried. GLUO, what's wrong? What did you see? I just looked at you, but you turned into a female ghost in my sight. GLUO did not believe Sukinghan directly, but also reached out his hand and held her palm. Feeling the familiar temperature and touch, GLUO confirmed Sukinghan's identity. Female ghost. Could it be? Sukinghan was the only person present who was not affected. Almost as soon as she turned her head, Qiu Kyo and Luo Fison on the other side also let out a shrill scream, then turned around and started running away. Help. Ghosts. RRRRR. Qiu Kyo was already terrified. In her sight, Sukinghan and Luo had turned into two evil ghosts with rotting flesh and miserable death. She ran away desperately, but because she was soaked in mud, she fell to the ground all of a sudden and couldn't get up on the slippery ground for a while. I see. Sukinghan's eyes turned cold, and he threw the ice umbrella in his hand over his head. In an instant, the breath of ice filled the top of the jungle, and all the raindrops were frozen into ice crystals. Then, Sukinghan let go of Luo's hand and flashed to Qiu Kyo and Luo Fison, grabbing their arms. Qiu Kyo. Dr. Luo. Wake up, it's me. Sukinghan pulled the two people up from the ground. Qiu Kyo was trembling with fear at first. After a while, she opened her eyes and breathed a sigh of relief after seeing that it was Sukinghan. Sukinghan, it's really you. It's me. Are you two okay? No, I'm fine. Luo Fison was also frightened, and her legs went weak. Although she didn't fall, the umbrella in her hand was gone, and the flashlight fell into the water and went out. You can't escape. You will all die. You will all be eaten by me. Outside the forest, where the cold air could not reach, the female ghost screamed miserably. She seemed unable to accept that her grave had been dug up, and her tone was particularly angry. GLUO, why do you think she is so afraid of people digging up her grave? Sukinghan took Qiu Kyo and walked back to the grave. GLUO looked at the empty coffin and rubbed his palms thoughtfully. There is neither her body nor her important things in it. This grave is just a decoration. But when we opened the grave, she went crazy. The only explanation is, she was afraid that the truth would be exposed after someone found out that her body was missing. Perfect judgment, you really reminded me. Sukinghan hadn't thought of this at first, but after GLUO's reminder, combined with the previous things, a most incredible conclusion sprouted in Sukinghan's mind. GLUO, something is going to happen in the village. Yes, something big is going to happen. GLUO looked up and looked at the hailstones falling on his head, and his expression became more and more serious. At this moment, GLUO finally understood what happened to the two people who killed each other and died together. Obviously, all of this is the work of the ghost girl. The rainstorm she brought down is not just rain. In this rainstorm, she may be able to perform illusions and auditory hallucinations. It doesn't sound very powerful, but this is equivalent to controlling two of the five senses of a person, and the most important ones are vision and hearing. GLUO can already imagine that, if the ghost girl uses all her strength, then everyone in Maoan village will start to kill each other, and fall into the most terrifying desperate situation. Boom. Suddenly, lightning flashed across the sky, instantly illuminating the entire village. The already heavy rain became more rapid, and the rain in the sky almost became a string. Obviously, she has started now. Sukinghan is not afraid of the situation in front of her. GLUO is by her side. As long as she protects him, it doesn't matter what happens to others. As for the rest, Yizun is half of the person Sukinghan wants to protect. She is now sleeping in the house. No matter how haunted the village is, she can't wake up. Instead, she is absolutely safe. As for the others, it doesn't matter. Kinghan, we can't just stand by and watch them kill each other. GLUO thought he was far superior to ordinary evolvers. He was a peak evolver of the second Black Iron stage, and had an extremely powerful trump card. But even so, he suffered a big loss, and attacked Sukinghan. If it was someone else, they would definitely be played to death. We are here to solve the incident after all. Okay, Sukinghan didn't care who to save. It didn't matter what happened to others. As long as GLUO wanted to, he would save them. Sukinghan raised her hand, bent 2 fingers, and created an ice umbrella again. Then she took off her coat, wrapped the handle of the ice umbrella with her clothes, and handed it to Kyukaio. Sukinghan, this is Kyukaio, Dr. Luo, you hold this ice umbrella now, go south immediately, keep going and don't look back, no matter what happens, or what you see, you must not look back, and you must not stop. Sukinghan is not an indifferent person, so she spent some time to find a way out for the 2 people around her. Remember, you can only stop and rest until you leave the foothills and there is no rain in the sky. As long as there is no heavy rain in the sky, it proves that you have walked out of the dangerous area, and then call the police directly. Okay, I understand. Kyukaio trusted Sukinghan very much, so she took the ice umbrella decisively without any hesitation, and prepared to leave immediately. Then I wish you a safe journey. GLUO came over and handed a flashlight to Luofizan. The 2 of them walked in the mountains in the dark, and they must not be without light, otherwise they would not be able to get out at all. Kyukaio, Dr. Luo, the 2 of you must hold hands. No matter what the other person becomes, you must never let go. Don't be afraid. Just hold this umbrella and keep moving forward. Understood? Dr. Luo and I will tie our hands together and never let go. Chapter 390, extensive reference. That's good. Let's get going quickly and try to get out before dawn. GLUO didn't say any more nonsense. He held Sukinghan's hand. The 2 said goodbye to Kyukaio and the others, and then watched them go away. Kinghan, do you feel that our current situation is a bit like a ghost movie? After becoming an evolver, GLUO was actually quite courageous. He had watched a lot of ghost movies. He didn't care about the general situation, but those ghost movies that left a name in the film and television industry still left him with some shadows. Of course you are talking about the old corpse in the mountain village, right? Sukinghan still remembered this childhood shadow, which was also a tragic death of a woman, and also used water as the medium. GLUO, do you think it is possible that the scene created by this wild soul is imitating the old corpse in the mountain village? Imitation? GLUO wanted to deny it reflexively, but as he thought about the situation, he also had this feeling. GLUO, I feel like I have found the truth. Sukinghan raised her eyebrows proudly. GLUO turned her head and was about to ask her what the truth was when a bright fire suddenly broke out in the village. Someone detonated a bomb. Not good. Let's go quickly. GLUO is not an indifferent person. There are nearly 250 locals and outsiders in Mayoan village. If he doesn't do something, then before dawn, these people will definitely kill each other completely. That scene is simply hell. GLUO no longer hides his secrets at this time. He directly uses all his strength to activate the source power. The blue-purple source power flows around him. The rain in the sky can't touch him at all, and the illusion of the evil ghost is invalid. Compared with GLUO, Sukinghan is much more leisurely. She created another ice umbrella and lazily put the umbrella on her side. She didn't seem to use any strength, but she followed GLUO steadily, not falling a step. Ding, ding, ding. At this time, in the village soaked in bio, there was suddenly a dense sound of gunfire, and the sound of painful wailing was vaguely heard, so anxious that GLUO had to speed up again. There are only 100 or 200 households in Mayoan village. Because of the large number of outsiders, almost every household has residents. At this time, all the families have suffered a disaster, and screams are coming one after another. GLUO hurried and rushed into the village, just in time to see Wang Fucheng and his senior brother Liu Fangzhu fighting blood. The 2 people have been completely fascinated. In each other's eyes, the image is likely to be the most hideous and terrifying evil ghost, so they are extremely cruel and desperate, so now it is completely a lose-lose situation. Stop. GLUO rushed over quickly, trying to stop the 2, but he didn't expect that Wang Fucheng and Liu Fangzhu would immediately change their targets of attack as soon as they saw him, and all rushed towards him. Fortunately, GLUO is not a mediocre person. Wang Fucheng and Liu Fangzhu are not even evolvers, and they are almost no threat to GLUO. He knocked them both unconscious with a single move and then threw them into the house. To be honest, the injuries on these two people were too serious, and it was still unknown whether they could survive. Now that Mayoan village was on fire everywhere, GLUO had no time to carefully diagnose and save the two people and could only leave it to fate. King Han, let's go to the left and the right and try to save people when we see them. GLUO's mind was full of saving people. Under the hallucination of the female ghost, there were fights everywhere in the village. Obviously, they were all sleeping in the house, and no one knew how they could break out at the same time. Could it be there is an incubation period? GLUO had some guesses in his mind, but he didn't have time to verify this. He walked to the left at full speed, and Su Qinghan disappeared into the darkness on the right. Without Su Qinghan, GLUO actually felt a little weak, but there was no time to make him feel uneasy. GLUO had just jumped over a house when he saw two ordinary people chopping at each other with kitchen knives. Fear and cruelty were mixed in them, making their attacks on each other more vicious. It's just going crazy. GLUO couldn't end their illusions, so he could only knock them out and throw them into the house. But what GLUO didn't expect was that as soon as he turned around, the man named He Pinggan chopped at him with a knife. GLUO had heard of Langhu Mountain, but he really didn't know what kind of school this place was and what skills they would learn after 3 years. Or, where can they find jobs after graduation? Because he had strange ideas in his mind, GLUO's injured movement slowed down a bit, allowing He Pinggan to chop GLUO's corner of his clothes. Yo, okay. GLUO didn't expect that He Pinggan, a bronze level evolver, could actually chop the corner of his clothes, which was really good. Therefore, GLUO took it a little seriously, and with the absolute difference in source power, he crushed He Pinggan and hammered him to the ground. Go GLUO stretched out his hand and threw He Pinggan into Wang Fucheng's house and jumped over the side roof again, knocking out an outsider who was killing villagers. Ding, ding, ding. At this moment, another burst of rapid gunfire rang out, and GLUO decisively rushed to the source, but when he saw the truth, he was stunned. The old Wu Tao who was cowering in the corner before was holding a pistol at this time, pulling the trigger mercilessly, and killed one of the 6 people who were in charge of the outsider before. After that, the old Wu Tao seemed to have gone crazy. He rushed into his room, took out the hidden bullets, and started loading them one by one. However, before the old Wu Tao could fill the magazine, GLUO had knocked him unconscious with a knife. No. What's going on? How is this possible? Siwen. What are you doing? You promised you won't hurt anyone in the village. The old village chief's voice suddenly came from the streets flooded by heavy rain. GLUO wanted to rush over at first, but when he heard the old village chief's words, GLUO was stunned. Wait. What do you mean? Why is Huang Han your daughter-in-law, and you call your granddaughter's name? No wonder you always want to mind your own business, and don't want to get involved in anything. It turns out that you have communicated with the mastermind behind the scenes. Kill only outsiders, and don't hurt people from the same village. However, in the current situation, this agreement is simply a joke. Not to mention not killing villagers, everyone has gone crazy, and has no ability to identify who is who. Obviously, and sadly, the old village chief was deceived. His granddaughter who was loved so much. Siwen. Where are you? Come out. Stop it. You can't go on like this. You can't kill any more people. The old village chief stood alone in the heavy rain. He shouted with all his might, but there was no response from anyone around him. Chapter 391. Apology. The only proof that the old village chief was not crazy was that at this time, the people around him had been fighting each other to the point of madness, but the old village chief was the only one who was not affected. In fact, no matter where the old village chief went, the people controlled by the illusion would move their positions. Although the old village chief was not confused by the illusion, he could not get close to anyone at all. He could not do anything. GLUO walked out of the house slowly. When he passed the well outside the door, he suddenly stopped and sighed on his face. So, that's it. Water is the medium of illusion. Now everyone has drunk it. What can be saved? As long as the mastermind behind the scenes is not dead, these people will not stop killing each other. Everyone is already terminally ill and there is no hope. Amid the deafening screams and roars, lightning and thunder roamed in the rainstorm that covered the sky. The sky would occasionally be illuminated, but in the illusion of confusion, everyone could no longer control themselves and could only fight madly. At this moment, it doesn't matter whether you can tell the truth from the false, because everyone wants to kill each other. If you hold back, you will die. It's really a sin. Gluo understood everything and stopped trying to stop the fighting of the people around him. He walked through the long street flooded with water and found the old village chief at the end of the street. He watched him kneel down and cry in front of the bodies of the 2 children. Old village chief, now, can you tell me? Gluo walked to the old village chief, pulled him up by the collar, and his eyes looked a little fierce because he had seen too much killing. Tell me, where is the wild soul hiding? If we don't kill her, everyone will die. No one can survive. I don't know. I really don't know. The old village chief's expression didn't seem to be lying, but he was obviously an insider. Why did he seem as ignorant as others? Gluo, come, leave it to me. I will help you find the mastermind behind the scenes. Sukinghan's figure suddenly walked out of the darkness on the side. Gluo turned his head with a helpless expression. King Han, have you been following me? Of course, the lives of those people are none of my business. Only you are the most important. At this time, Sukinghan didn't feel cheesy at all when she said love words. She walked to Gluo and dragged the old village chief in front of her, and then, Village Chief G, lend me something from you. The exhausted old man had no idea what Sukinghan wanted to do, and she didn't even listen to his answer. Before he opened his mouth, Sukinghan had already turned her fingers into a knife, and the ice blue source power turned into a blade, and as she chopped, it went straight down. Puff. Sukinghan's action was too straightforward, and Gluo didn't even react, and saw Sukinghan cut off the old village chief's left arm, and then, the girl threw the old man's arm to the ground, like throwing away garbage. The old man covered his bleeding wound, and fell into the mud of the heavy rain, dyeing everything around him red. Jisuwen, come out. If you don't come out, I will kill your dear grandfather directly. He is very good to you, right? He is the only relative you have, shouldn't you keep him well? The expression on Sukinghan's face was indescribably bad. The icy blue mist lingered around her, repelling all the rain. Die. In the wind and rain, the shrill whine sounded again, and the howling ghost flew towards Sukinghan like an arrow. Even Gluo couldn't see the trajectory clearly, but Sukinghan caught it. It was an absolute crushing. Sukinghan just stood there and grasped the hideous ghost in his hand. The evil spirit with a miserable death looked extremely terrifying and numbed people's scalps, but Sukinghan didn't care at all. The ice blue mist spread over the wild soul under her control, completely locking the 4th silver level wild soul. Because it was too simple, Gluo even felt that there was an illusion that the 4th silver level wild soul was nothing great. It had been hiding behind and making trouble, but as soon as it appeared, it was killed by Sukinghan in seconds. Of course, it was not that the 4th silver level wild soul was weak, but that Sukinghan was too terrifying at this time. Gluo didn't understand this truth yet, but soon, he would know. At this moment, the 4th silver level wild soul was held in Sukinghan's hand. She tried to struggle with all her might, but Sukinghan's icy blue source power was not something she could resist. The frost gradually froze her limbs, making her struggle even more ridiculous. Jisuwen, your mother is in my hands, why don't you come out? Or, don't you even care about your mother? Sukinghan then threw the hideous wild soul in her hand to the ground, just like throwing a frozen salted fish, and then she raised her foot and stepped on the head of the wild soul arrogantly. Jisuwen, come out, your hiding is meaningless. Let me guess what you did. 3 years ago, you looked at the body of your mother who committed suicide, and you fell into despair and madness. However, this negative emotion did not kill you, but instead made you awaken the original talent. And it is an ability that no one has ever heard of or thought of. You dug out your mother's body and used the body as a carrier to restrain her soul in it, which is considered to have found your mother. Everyone thinks you are a child. No one knows how powerful you are. You go into the mountains every day and stay there all day. But in fact, you secretly go to the slaughterhouse in the suburbs every day, where your mother devours souls and sucks blood. You are its master and its slave, because it is your mother. There was not much anger and contempt in Sukinghan's tone. She was just stating something that was a matter of course. Gluo was listening to Sukinghan's story, and many of his previous doubts suddenly became clear. Siwen, the old village chief, was the only one there. He listened to the sounds of fighting in the distance, the sound of rain around him, and the roar of the wild soul under Sukinghan's feet. Tears streamed down his face, and he felt pain and self-blame. I shouldn't have concealed everything you did for you. The old village chief covered the wound on her left arm, and suddenly struggled to get up, and rushed towards Sukinghan. Sukinghan narrowed his eyes, and then turned sideways, and chose to dodge. However, what no one expected was that the old village chief's real target was not Sukinghan, but the trapped wild soul under her feet. The old village chief rushed to the hideous female ghost, and raised his fist and smashed it down, as if he wanted revenge. However, this behavior is simply ridiculous. Then, the crazy female ghost opened her mouth and bit the old village chief's neck, sucking his blood in big mouthfuls, as if she was taking out all the resentment she had for so many years on him. I'm sorry. The old village chief seemed to have known his fate a long time ago. With a smile on his face, he finally expressed the apology he had been holding in his heart for so many years. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392, Destined. Cause and Effect, Fate, and Destiny. Sukinghan stood at the side, watching the miserable death of the old village chief, without pity, only sighing. The cause and effect of 3 years created monsters and demons. Now revenge has come, and everyone will die in it, and no one can escape. So, that's it. Gluo stopped quietly in place, just as an unrelated bystander, watching this drama. Everything after that no longer needs him. It is destined. Life and death are reincarnated. In the distance, illuminated by lightning, a small figure floated in. Her steps did not seem fast, but every step was a flash, as if the frame was dropped, and the process of moving forward was omitted. In a few blinks, she stood in the field. She was a very beautiful little girl, 12 or 13 years old, and had not grown up yet, but her mouth corners were slightly raised, with a hint of arrogance. The rain in the sky strangely avoided her location, and even the water flow under the ground was separated before she stepped on it, revealing the ground. Siwen, you finally came out. Sukinghan turned his head to look at the corpse of the old village chief on the ground, and the half-frozen soul, with a nonchalant smile on his face. Your grandfather is dead, and you just came out. It's too late. No, it's just right. Siwen's voice was childish, and it seemed a little ethereal in the night. She raised her hand, and the female ghost on the ground immediately brought the corpse of the old village chief to Siwen's side. Death is not the end of everything, but the beginning of a new life. Siwen spread out her right hand, and the grey-black mist surged in her palm, and then drilled into the corpse of the old village chief. After flowing together, the smoke expanded by nearly twice, and returned to Siwen's hand again. My sister, you are in such a hurry to see me. Is there something wrong? Siwen's attitude towards Sukinghan was completely unexpected by Gluo. Obviously, Sukinghan directly killed his grandfather, but Siwen still looked like she didn't care, and even called Sukinghan sister. Gluo's eyes stayed on Siwen for a while, and then turned to Sukinghan. They had nothing in common, so how could they be sisters? What does it mean? Several situations. Has the world line changed? Siwen, I'm not your sister. Your sister is dead. Sukinghan stood not far in front of Gluo, but she didn't have the courage to turn around and face Gluo's eyes. She just denied it, weakly denied it. Sister Sukinghan, whether you are my sister or not cannot be determined by simple words. Siwen tapped her fingers lightly, and the majestic soul power burst out from her fingertips. The whole world seemed to be shaken for a moment, and then, the ice on the female ghost's body shattered instantly, and outside the distant rain curtain, Countless ghost shadows flew over, like a gathering army. 3 years ago, my mother committed suicide in hatred and despair. With God's blessing, I awakened my original talent called Demon Corpse. I dug out my mother's body, put her soul back in, and created my first Demon Corpse servant. I always knew that my power was not tolerated by this world, so I had been hiding it, trying my best to hide it. For the sake of my mother, I wandered around the slaughterhouse every day, and even sneaked into the dirty pool of blood, using all means to feed it and nurture her, just like she did to me. As for me, I have never thought of killing anyone. I just want to have a beautiful family. Even if everyone has changed, I still want to have a father, a mother, and a grandfather who loves me. However, my wish is impossible after all. My father told me in person that he was ecstatic about my mother's death. He felt that my mother had betrayed him, and even suspected that I was not her daughter. Ji Si-won was telling a very tragic story, but she was smiling so happily that tears were streaming down her face. I gave him a chance, but he was stubborn and kept crossing my bottom line. I could tolerate him beating me and scolding me, but he couldn't desecrate my once beautiful family. So, you killed him? Gluo almost understood the whole story at this time. The 3-year tragedy extended a series of terrible consequences, one of which was that Ji Si-won awakened the original talent. After 3 years of dormancy, Ji Si-won awakened the source power and officially became an evolver. The surge in power also made Ji Si-won unable to endure the insults of her father. Obviously just a useless waste. What qualifications does he have to insult such an extraordinary existence as her? Yes, so I killed him and ordered my mother to give him a desperate death with her own hands. Ji Si-won said it lightly, but through her cold tone, it is hard to imagine what kind of mood she was in 3 years ago when she turned her mother into a ghost corpse and raised it day after day and year after year. 3 years later, what kind of emotions did this little girl of 12 or 13 years old have when she personally ordered and watched with her own eyes her mother, who had turned into a ghost corpse, torture her father to death? Ji Si-won, you also performed a blood sacrifice. Gluo didn't even know what kind of emotions he had towards Ji Si-won who committed all this. After experiencing despair and pain, she turned from a victim to a perpetrator, from an ignorant and happy girl to a monster who would sacrifice in the name of a person. That piece of ancient jade should be an ancient artifact passed down in your family. You used it to perform a blood sacrifice. Who did you kill? Huh? Who? Guess who? Ji Si-won seemed to have heard a funny joke. She laughed so hard that she fell backwards. Her childish voice made people's scalps numb. As for me, I have never killed anyone indiscriminately. I created ghost corpses, but I used the souls and blood of livestock. I killed my father because he was deeply sinful and he had to pay with his life. But I have never changed. All I want is for our family to be together again. Ji Si-won, you are offering a blood sacrifice to yourself. Soo Kyung-hun looked at Ji Si-won expressionlessly. There was no joy or sadness in her voice, as if she was just stating a statement. Ji Si-won liked Soo Kyung-hun very much. She nodded happily, as if she was very happy that Soo Kyung-hun did not misunderstand her. She was not a killing monster. She was just doing what she was supposed to do. I'll listen to the command of my god in the rainstorm. I offered myself as a blood sacrifice in exchange for the mercy of my god. Chapter 393, The Desolate God. God. When Gluo heard Ji Si-won's fanatical voice, his originally calm mood suddenly became agitated. He had heard this specific name from a dead girl. Gluo's breathing began to quicken, and the indescribable chill made him unconsciously take 2 steps back, looking at Ji Si-won with horror in his eyes. Ji Si-won, who is your god? What's its name? My god is the soul-destroying dead and the star-eating spirits of the desolate underworld, the world eater, Tikatera. Ji Si-won's voice was not loud, but when she said the name of the god, the whole world seemed to stagnate for a moment, as if avoiding this name. The god of desolation and darkness, Tikatera. Gluo repeated the name softly, and as she muttered, an invisible sense of gaze appeared on him. Gluo raised his head, and the thick clouds blocked the image outside the zenith. But Gluo knew that the giant pupil had already arrived. Obviously, his existence has surpassed a certain concept. As long as someone recites his name, he will feel it, and if necessary, he will even cast a look. So, GLUO pursed his lips, and dared not say his name again. GLUO even decided to list this name as the top secret, and not let anyone know it. Because, as long as someone recites this name, he will come closer. Hehe, I see fear on your face. Ji Siwon showed a proud smile. She raised her palm, and hundreds of ghosts floated in the wind and rain. Then she stood quietly in her life, as if waiting for orders. In the name of my God, I'm the second apostle. The souls of the dead who are full of resentment, anger, and despair are all my followers. So, that's it. GLUO was still wondering why a wild soul could have the ability to change the weather. Now, all the doubts have been solved. The existence outside the zenith. After sending down his first apostle, the result obtained was obviously very unsatisfactory to him. Jiang Yuan chose death for Su Qinghan, which was simply a betrayal. So, this time, the Shenming who was spying on the world chose to send down the second apostle. And this apostle was carefully selected by it. He first used some method to gain communication with Ji Siwon. After she offered her loyalty and faith, he also gave her power. The price was that Ji Siwon sacrificed her blood and became a dead controlled by him. In this case, there is really no way. GLUO slowly clenched his fists, and his mind had already eliminated all thoughts. Now, it is no longer a matter of wild souls or death. In this village, anyone can live, but Ji Siwon cannot. After all this is over, it doesn't matter who dies, even if everyone dies, but his apostle must die. The mistakes of the old village chief, the life and death of Yizin, the infighting of the people around, everything, is no longer important. Ji Siwon, I have heard your story. I will not comment on right or wrong. Cause and effect, etc. no longer matter. Only you must disappear. GLUO has made a desperate plan. Although before, Ji Siwon was only a bronze level evolver, but now, after becoming his apostle, Ji Siwon's level should have been 6th gold level. To be honest, GLUO didn't know if he could win, but he knew that no matter what, he couldn't let her leave alive. Haha, human, do you want to kill me before I'm fully awakened? I'm now at the peak of the VTH sub-gold level. After eating all the souls in the village, I can reach the 6th gold level. Complete awakening. Ji Siwon didn't care about GLUO's killing intention. She seemed to have won the victory and was ready to complete the last step. After tonight, she could ascend the throne. Poor man, you are still dreaming. By the way, sister, you haven't told this human about your true identity yet? What do you mean? GLUO had already prepared for a desperate battle, but Ji Siwon's teasing words made GLUO suddenly fall into fear. He turned his head and looked at Ji Siwon with a determined face and exhaled in despair. Su Qinghan. GLUO felt an indescribable betrayal. His voice was hoarse, as if it was rubbed out blood. His veins popped up all over his body, and his source power surged like a tide in an instant. Jiang Yuan. GLUO pressed his hand against his forehead. Anger and despair made his brain congested in an instant. His fingers pinched his skull, as if he wanted to crush his head. Su Qinghan, do you know what you did? GLUO. I'm sorry. Su Qinghan's voice was very soft, so soft that it was almost hard to hear in the rain. She turned her head and looked at the hysterical GLUO, with a smile on her face and tears running down her cheeks. GLUO, I'm sorry. I want to save Mu Yingluo. I want to kill Tang Zujian. I want to kill Fook. I have too much hatred. I no longer have the ability to start over, so I need the power to win once. Su Qinghan. Do you know what you did? GLUO stepped hard on the ground, and a hole was instantly stepped out of the muddy and watery ground. Then he stepped on it again and again, and the surrounding ground was shaking. Su Qinghan. I said I would help you. At least give me a little trust. Just a little bit. GLUO felt that he was betrayed again, just like Kichudi. He was clearly ready to risk his life to support Su Qinghan. However, Su Qinghan did not believe him. She would rather believe in a dead person, betray him, betray the entire human race, and become an apostle of Shenming. GLUO, I am actually very scared. Su Qinghan's lips trembled. She seemed to want to walk to GLUO and touch him again, but her reason prevented her from moving. Because no one could understand better than her what the desolate godming the world eating Ticatera meant, and what his apostle meant. After all, she had become his first apostle and the sister of the second apostle in front of her. Ji Siwen. GLUO, please don't blame Jiang Yuan. She reminded me, warned me, and even prepared another path for me. It was me who chose this path. Su Qinghen's voice was full of guilt. The coldness around her spread like a flag, waiting for her summoned followers to come. In the distance, the wolves are running. Chapter 394, Sisters. In the blurry rainstorm, countless wolves were moving forward like a white avalanche. They walked in unison, as if they were an army. The fur of these wolves was snow white, their pupils had turned into a clear blue color of frost, their claws were as bright as ice crystals, and their breath was frosty, freezing the surrounding rain into ice. The winter wolf in front of the wolf pack was as big as an elephant, and every step was accompanied by a slight tremor. The size of the winter wolf in the middle was larger than that of an average adult rhino. The winter wolf following at the back was as big as an old ox, and their number was the largest, almost tens of thousands, covering the sky and the earth, and countless. At Su Qinghen's call, the winter wolves surrounded the entire Maoan village. Only the largest existence was qualified to stand behind Su Qinghen. And what GLUO saw was exactly this scene. So, it's you. The smile on GLUO's face was a little crazy. He felt that he was really stupid. Su Qinghen had revealed his flaws many times. Why didn't he find it? He was so familiar with this winter wolf. Aren't these the wolf shadows he saw on the other side of the grassland? They wanted to surround him and bite him at first, but inexplicably, they ran away quickly. Now that I think about it, it was Su Qinghen's order. Moreover, the next day, in such a large grassland, she found him the next day. How could this be a coincidence? GLUO now even recalled clearly that when he was in the grassland and found the wolf pack, they were all ordinary wolves. Then he fell asleep inexplicably, and when he woke up, those grassland wolves turned into wild beasts. As for that dream, GLUO had never paid attention to it before. Now that I think about it, it was probably the last moment before Su Qinghen changed from a human to an apostle. That eternal side is actually a farewell. That day, in his dream, the wind and snow were lingering. He stood in the empty white world, and what he heard was probably the last dying words of Su Qinghen when he was still a human being. GLUO, come, I'm waiting for you. I've been waiting for you. GLUO, it's me. It can only be me. I've missed you for too long. Come here. GLUO, don't you remember me? How long has it been? It's been too long. Time shouldn't have passed so long. GLUO, I remember you. I always remember you. I've remembered you for too long. So long that I've forgotten who you are. You don't remember me. How is that possible? You can't forget me. You said you would always remember me. You promised. I don't believe you would lie to me. I don't believe it. GLUO, that's great. I knew you didn't forget me, and I didn't forget you. GLUO, you want to see me? Ah, you should want to see me. I want to see you too. I've always wanted to see you. It's great you really came to see me, for the last time. GLUO recalled the dream so clearly that he seemed to be trapped in it, unable to extricate himself, covering his head, and the experience of that moment was vivid. He heard her voice full of resentment and expectation. She was happy to see him, and everything she said was like her attachment to him. Unfortunately, all this was too short, and the last words he left were just a motto. Listen, the white-breathed wolves are running, and the unicorn whales are cruising. The land and the sea are quiet, but they have already begun to sing the poem of winter. Then, the winter wind stopped, the frosty snow stopped, the pale world was opened like a curtain, the scene in the distance was instantly brought closer, the world was distorted for a moment, and then it was normal. Su Qinghen, as GLUO saw her, was frozen in the ice. She closed her eyes, like a sleeping beauty who couldn't wake up. Then, the space began to be infinitely stretched. No matter how GLUO ran, he couldn't touch Su Qinghen. He could only watch Su Qinghen getting farther and farther away, and finally, disappeared. That day, when he didn't know it, he lost her after all, forever. GLUO really wanted to be with her, forever, to watch the sunset and the rise in the east, and the coolness of late summer. In the spring, listen to her mumbling and remind her after returning home to nail the loose buttons on his shirt for him. In the summer, hold an umbrella for her and the continuous rain lines flow down from the edge of the umbrella, jumping between his shoulders and the edge of the building. In the fall, accompany her to watch the stars. The sky is full of stars, and the constellations that are linked together have never changed in time. In the winter, wait for snow with her, see the lights of thousands of houses, snowflakes fluttering, and another year has passed. The past is too beautiful, betrayal is too hurtful. The more you love, the more you hate. The more you hate, the more pain you feel. The pain is so severe that you grit your teeth and tremble all over, but when you look back, you still smile with tears and sweetness in your eyes. The first apostle. In the wind and rain, Gluo got up from the ground. His eyes seemed to be burning with fire. It was not hatred, nor pain, but the determination to die. Gluo, I saw your determination. Please give me a little time. Please give me the last trust. Sukinghan had tears in her eyes and smiled beautifully and sadly. Although she had prepared herself mentally before, at this moment, when she took on all the consequences, it was so painful. The pain went deep into her bones and soaked into her soul. At this moment, she finally lost him forever. She also had fantasies and hopes. She wanted to accompany him, even if she knew it was a luxury, even if she knew it was coveted, but she still wanted to accompany him. Because she really loved Gluo. Please stand there and look at me. Look at the last gift I give you. Sukinghan looked at Gluo deeply. That look was so greedy that she wanted to look at him to the end, until life and death. This look was also so sad that she clearly wanted to imprint his figure in her mind and never forget it, but it was blurred by tears. Unfortunately, this look was only a moment after all. Then, Sukinghan turned around, as if she was completely separated from her human identity. She looked at Ji-Siwon not far away, with only coldness in her eyes. My sister, let's have a battle, to decide life and death. As the first apostle, I have long been looking forward to the power of the younger generation. Let's fight and decide life and death. Sukinghan, you. Ji-Siwon was completely dumbfounded by Sukinghan's behavior. These apostles, were all created by the god of desolation, the world eater, Tikatela. He controls their souls, his orders cannot be refused, and his will cannot be violated. But why did her sister, the first apostle named Sukinghan, attack her? Is this reasonable? My sister, are you ready? Chapter 395, Gift. My beloved needs a powerful soul crystal as food. This is all I can give him. Sukinghan finally faced her feelings calmly, but at this point, it was too late. Her pursuit all along was to rescue Mu Yingluo and kill Tang Zujian. In order to achieve this goal, she died hundreds of times and never gave up. However, now that she has finally gained absolute power and can easily rescue Mu Yingluo and kill Tang Zujian, she realized that there are things in this world that are more worthy of her cherishing than revenge. But she lost him. Listen. The white-breathed wolves are running, and the unicorn whales are cruising. The land and the ocean are quiet, but they have already begun to sing the poem of winter. Sukinghan couldn't stop her tears. She recited the motto of the poem of winter in the air, and her voice was like a mountain wave. My followers, in my name, move forward. Sukinghan waved her hand, and the winter wolf behind her rushed forward like a tide. Ji-Siwon let out an angry roar, and the wild souls and ghost corpses behind her also rushed towards the winter wolf. Sukinghan, my god will deprive you of everything. The grey source power around Ji-Siwon surged out like a tide, and her body jumped up and instantly rose into the sky. The sky was full of dark clouds and thunder, and the vast clouds began to gather, as if they were going to turn into a sort of heaven and earth. Until death. Sukinghan stepped up, as if he was stepping on a ladder. A layer of ice suddenly appeared in the air, allowing Sukinghan to land steadily, and then Sukinghan went up step by step, and layers of ice appeared one after another, like a ladder to heaven, stretching upward. In the twisted sky, the clouds rolled and thunder roared. The clouds covering the sky, under unimaginable power, were brewing an attack that could destroy everything on the ground. However, Sukinghan still had a smile on her face. She climbed up step by step. At a height of tens of meters, she turned her head and looked at Gluo deeply. Her lips moved slightly, as if she said something. Unfortunately, Gluo could no longer hear. Then, Sukinghan turned her head, and her pupils and whites of her eyes were no longer distinguishable. The cold light pierced through her eyes, like the wind and snow in the mountains. The ice blue source power lingered and stretched around her body. The gorgeous mist dragged out long shadows, like a winter storm. White breath wolf. Sukinghan's voice no longer had any emotion. She clasped her hands in the air, and the ice blue crystal fragments swirled up, forming a pair of gorgeous long swords in her hands. Compared to the short sword Sukinghan used before, the sword called White Breath Wolf was much larger and longer. Sukinghan held the sword in a backhanded manner, which looked like a pair of wings made of ice crystals. My sister, you are still too young. Sukinghan closed the two swords in her hands, and turned them into a long double-bladed sword in her hands. Then she pointed to the sky, as if calling out something. Nah whale. Woo. Wow 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 wow. Above the distant sky, the sound of a whale like a child crying, the condensing dark clouds and thunder, as if affected by something, are slowing down. The next moment, a white narwhal covering the sky descended. It plunged into the clouds, like rolling in the waves, using its huge body to forcibly break up the huge force that was gathering. The whale was 1,000 meters long. Its open mouth was like a cracked canyon. It absorbed the rolling water vapor around it like eating cotton candy. It swung its tail, and the endless cold air turned the surrounding clouds into snowflakes. So, winter came. Cold, deep bone deep cold, as if to freeze the soul. The storm blew and sucked, and the flying snow fell. Above the sky, the most magnificent scenery during the blizzard appeared, as if half of the sky had turned into snow, flowing vertically like a waterfall, shaking the world. In a way, to mortals, this is a war between demigods. On the ground, Gluo also felt the biting cold. He exhaled white air and watched the figure in the sky gradually blur. Sukinghan. Gluo muttered the name he had been thinking about for the last time, and then, like a traveler who was hypothermic in a blizzard, he fell to the ground. The death battle between the V sub gold level and the 6th gold level was far beyond Gluo's ability to get involved, not to mention that it was an apostle who existed like a god. This was probably the most peak war in this world since the emergence of source power and evolvers. The sky was turbulent, and the people who were fighting on the ground gradually lost their temperature and fell to the ground one after another. Sukinghan, you betrayed my god. Above the sky, Ji-Siwen's voice sounded exasperated. After she sacrificed herself with blood, her original talent was replaced and became the ability to control water polluted by her soul power. As for controlling the wild souls, that was her authority as an apostle, and those ghost corpses who still had bodies and souls were sealed in their bodies were her followers. As the second apostle, after Ji-Siwen gained power, she no longer took any existence seriously. In her eyes, humans were just food. Moreover, Ji-Siwen remained sufficiently vigilant. She did not expose herself abruptly, but set up a situation to attract enough food into the village. In fact, as long as she was given another day, she only needed to devour the souls of all the people in the village, and she could complete the awakening and reach the 6th golden stage. At that time, she could give her mother, father, and grandfather souls spiritual wisdom, and their family would be together again. But all of this was ruined by Sukinghan. Resentment, anger, and pain. Sukinghan. Ji-Siwen felt the possibility of her death. So she gave up the plan to stay alive and gathered her last blow towards Gluo on the ground. Feel the pain of losing your beloved. Ji-Siwen in the sky seemed to have turned into a black meteor with thick and dark clouds wrapped around her, falling down with the momentum of destroying everything. Ji-Siwen, it's over. Sukinghan was not panicked at all. She stood in the sky, holding the double swords named White Breath Wolf in her hands, and fell down to slash Frost Disaster Kingming Festival. So, at that moment, the wind and snow in the sky, along with that figure, the sword light that seemed to cut through the sea and mountains fell, ending everything halfway. At this moment, the falling snow and flowers, the wind and rain weaving brocade, the mountains and rivers are frosty, and the peaks are deep. Gluo, the gift for you is already in your right hand. After this, I will also go to fulfill my last wish. Goodbye, my love. And then, never see you again. Chapter 396, The War Between Kikaniwan and Kichudi. May 20th, 3006, 7:39. It was already daybreak. The dew on the grass tip dissipated in the sunlight, and a few butterflies fluttered back and forth, as if they were choosing which flower to eat for breakfast. In the dark tent, the girl who had just woken up let out a long hum, and then crawled out of the tent like a pig. Kichudi, when did you wake up? Kikaniwan was still a little confused, and her words sounded a little confused, but the girl who was making breakfast just smiled, and gave a reply that made Kikaniwan exclaim. You got up at 5 in the morning. You get up earlier than the chickens. Kikaniwan muttered a criticism of Kichudi's diligence, then twisted her buttocks, and walked to the toilet dug next to her to solve the congestion in her body. When Kikaniwan returned to the front of the tent, she had become a lively and lovely girl. Oh, there is actually fresh fish soup to drink. It's so touching. Finally, we don't have to eat canned food anymore. Kikaniwan was still wearing pajamas, but she didn't care about herself. She pulled the stool next to her and sat on it. Kichudi, is there any news about GLUO and Sukinghan? I just contacted them this morning, but no. Kichudi sighed, and the worry in her heart surged up again. More than half a month ago, she followed Jiang and Yu's order to go to Changlin City to meet up with Kikaniwan. As a substitute, GLUO and Sukinghan went to solve the reported abnormal incident. However, the last news was that more than half a month ago, GLUO and Sukinghan got off the train, and then they disappeared. The matter of Maoan village has now been determined to be over, but no one knows what happened during the period. The last survivors were only 3 people, more than 100 villagers, and more than 120 outsiders. All died. They died miserably, in various ways, and they were all frozen into ice sculptures. Among the 3 people alive, there was Yizin, an agent of the 19th Bureau of the National Security Bureau, but she was in a coma before GLUO and the others arrived, and she didn't wake up until today at the rescue center, so she couldn't get any information at all. As for the 2 ordinary people who were alive, one was called Qiu Kao and the other was called Deluo Fizan. They were doctors and nurses at the Maoan Village Health Center. The information about them was up to the time when GLUO and the others discovered the true identity of the wild soul. After that, nothing was known. As a result, it was incredible, but no one knew what happened in Maoan Village. Other places had clear skies, but there was a day and night of heavy rain there, just like a flood, and then there was a cold winter, which was really frozen 3 feet. GLUO and Sukinghan didn't find the bodies, but they also found that they were alive. As for the wild soul, who did all this, it was initially determined to be dead, but it was impossible to confirm whether it was true. Now the entire Maoan village is still under martial law. Kichudi used all his connections to investigate, but there was no doubt in the result. No one concealed anything. The matter was clearly there. The person just disappeared and could not be found. There was no way, no solution. However, in this situation, no news is the best news. After Kichudi's initial worries, she has calmed down and no longer worries about it. After all, she and Kikaniwan have not completed their mission. Jiang and Yu's order is to kill Chang Confixiang. The 2 relied on Yizi's ability to track him down. After more than half a month, they finally found Chang Confixiang's whereabouts. Bababe Kichudi, your cooking skills are not good. It's not as good as Yizi's fish soup. It's a pity that I can't take her with me. Although Kikaniwan has been with Kichudi for so many days, the relationship has eased a lot, but if there is a chance, she still wants to stab and criticize Kichudi for not being good in all aspects. However, because Kichudi is worried about GLUO, she has no time to confront her, so recently Kikaniwan is like hitting cotton, with no place to use her strength. Drink yours quickly, there will be a big fight soon, and Yizi is not suitable to follow. Kichudi is used to it now, and she can keep calm in front of Kikaniwan, and even give her a reasonable explanation. Well, Kikaniwan will be the most angry if she does this. Nonsense, I know. Kikaniwan drank the fish soup, while smacking her lips unhappily. She squinted her eyes, looking in the direction of the target, and her expression became serious. Kichudi, tell me, why? Chang Kunfei wants to run under the dam. Of course, there is a secret base in it. Kichudi finished the fish soup in the bowl, picked up the fish meat with chopsticks, and ate it carefully. She knew what Kikanian was going to ask, but she didn't give a direct answer. That was a dam, a key national project, and yet, someone secretly, no, maybe not secretly, but blatantly, built a secret base in the dam. Of course, the specific situation has not been found out yet, so Kichudi did not report it, so as not to alert the enemy. Originally, Kikanian really wanted to report it, and no one could persuade her, but Jiang Anyo's words made her obedient. You go in directly from the front, and kill everyone inside without leaving a single one. If it were official, they wouldn't be able to kill people. With Jiang Anyo's words, Kikanian stopped jumping around. She didn't even ask the reason, she just executed it with peace of mind. Instead, Kichudi had a secret communication with Jiang Anyo, from which Kichudi only remembered one sentence. Tang Zujian should be in there, kill him. We kept him alive back then, so that he could make more contributions to the country, but now the time is almost up. If we don't kill him, it will be more trouble than good. Kichudi realized at this time that what Tang Zujian did was not without people's attention. It was just that Jiang Anyo suppressed everything. She felt that Tang Zujian was a talent. She wanted to see him turn back and stop before it was too late. But unfortunately, Tang Zujian didn't know other people's painstaking efforts. He was still stubborn and was going further and further on the wrong path. He had become a threat, and now he had to be killed. Now that she knew all this, Kichudi had no questions. She even guessed why Jiang Anyo only asked her and Kikanian to come, because Jiang Anyo never stopped leaving people alive. If he wanted to kill everyone, there would be too many people and things would get out of hand. But with only the two of them, things would be much easier. They could just say that there were too many enemies and they couldn't hold back, so they had to kill them all. Anyway, in the end, with Jiang Anyo backing her up and executing her orders, Kichudi was not afraid of anyone. That's right, Jiang Anyo's connections were that strong. Of course, Kichudi also secretly asked Jiang Anyo about Luo's situation, and the answer she got made Kichudi feel at ease. In this world, even if everyone dies, Luo will not die. He is much more powerful than you can imagine. Chapter 397, On the Road. Okay, I'm done. Let's go. Kikanian deliberately ate very quickly, and when Kichudi hadn't finished eating yet, she started to pack up noisily. It must be said that Kikanian was really childish, doing things in a hurry, without considering the cause and effect, just relying on intuition. However, it was amazing that Kikanian's intuition was rarely wrong, and even if it was wrong, it might get unexpectedly good results. This indescribable luck made Kichudi a little jealous, but the girl didn't show it, but her tolerance for Kikanian increased, allowing her to do some childish tricks. Blessing. Kichudi looked at Kikanian's jumping figure, scooped herself another bowl of fish soup, and quietly tasted the sweet taste. Kikanian didn't hide it from her. Kichudi knew very well that Kikanian was not an evolver, nor did she have the original talent. Her way of fighting was to rely on a blessing. Kikanian also forgot who it was, but she remembered that he was a very good big brother. The blessing from that person made her very lucky, and this blessing could also be transformed into a gun. When she held the spear, she had super strong force comparable to that of an evolver. Of course, at the beginning, Kichudi still had some doubts, but after fighting together once, Kichudi was relieved to leave her back to Kikanian. In this world, the original talents are really strange, and some abilities are simply miracles. Kichudi, hurry up. I have packed the tent. Kikanian dragged out the tone and began to urge again. Kichudi drank the fish soup in one gulp and got up to start packing. Because the two people had business to do, they packed their things in a sloppy manner, but the car they drove was very large, so they didn't worry about these troubles. However, it would be difficult to set up camp next time. Kikanian, fasten your seatbelt, don't stick your head out again. Kichudi started the car and kindly reminded Kikanian But the girl not only didn't appreciate it, but also snorted with disdain, obviously continuing her obstinacy. Anyway, she had reminded him, so Kichudi didn't say anything more. The two drove the off-road vehicle, crossed a wasteland, and got on a brand new road. This road was built for the dam. It is said that a lot of money was spent. Now it is smooth to drive. The white horse passed Leon, the March sky, the spring breeze filled the grass, and Wild, who is so far away, looking up at the kite, Kikaniwan hummed the song softly, looking very happy. Kichudi was a little nervous at first, but under Kikaniwan's heartless encouragement, she also relaxed. Ding ding dong. Kichudi's mobile phone suddenly rang, and before she reached out to take it, Kikaniwan had already picked it up and muttered, "Don't look at your phone while driving." What message? Kichudi's phone didn't have anything shameful to read, so she let Kikaniwan read it. Kikaniwan stared at the screen for a long time, and finally pouted. The message said that it has been confirmed that Chang Kunfei wanted to follow Tang Ziujian into the dam. There was a woman named Fook who was Tang Ziujian's bodyguard. She had some tricks and asked us to be careful. The reason why Kikaniwan was unhappy was naturally the last sentence of Jiang and Yu's text message, asking them to be careful. It was as if she didn't believe them. Please, she, Kikaniwan, was her successor. How could she be so useless? No matter who the enemy was, no matter how many enemies there were, she would defeat them all and return home perfectly unscathed. Reply with a sentence, "I know." Kichudi looked at Kikaniwan's unhappy expression and couldn't help laughing. This silly girl, Jiang Yu obviously knew her tricks, so how could he not believe her? The reason why Jiang Yu sent this message was not to remind the two to be careful and safe, but to remind them to be careful of the other party's means and not let her run away. The subtext of this sentence is, no matter where the other party runs, they must chase her and kill her, leaving no one alive. Minister, you didn't send me a message. Kikaniwan sent the message, threw down Kichudi's mobile phone, and started to lose her temper again. Others are fine, but Kikaniwan really cares about Jiang Yu. In her heart, the minister is omnipotent. She is like a child who longs for Jiang Yu's recognition. She always gets entangled in trivial matters, which is extremely cute. Okay, wait until we complete the task. You send her a text message report, and Lord Jiang Yu will definitely be very pleased with your growth and praise you for a while. Well, that makes sense. Then I'll start editing the good news text message now. Kikaniwan is a beautiful girl who thinks up ideas and works hard when she gets down to work. She muttered and took the mobile phone and really started to edit the text message seriously. Obviously, she is really confident. Of course, Kichudi didn't worry too much, but she still remained alert. After Kikaniwan stopped disturbing her, she began to drive seriously and pay attention to the surrounding situation at all times. The location of the dam is at the end of this road. Kichudi drove very steadily and didn't find anything unusual along the way. Kikaniwan, who was next to her, spent more than half an hour to edit the text message. Then, Kikaniwan read through her message with satisfaction, put the phone back in her pocket, and started to toss again. Kikaniwan stuck her head out of the window and shouted happily. There was wilderness around, no cars or people. Kichudi glanced at her and let her play naughty. The season has officially entered summer. Normally, the temperature should be getting hotter and hotter, but Kichudi opened the car window and felt a chill. Kikaniwan, do you feel cold? Kichudi closed the window on her side. Kikaniwan seemed to feel cold at this time, so he retracted his head into the car and closed the window. Is the temperature so low by the river? Although Kikaniwan was in good health, she had no source of power after all, so she quickly felt cold. As the car gradually approached the dam, she was even shivering with cold. She found a long-sleeved shirt and put it on, but she was still cold. Why is it only 5 degrees? At this time, Kichudi also confirmed that the temperature was abnormal. She asked Kikaniwan to find the thermometer. When they saw the temperature on it, they were both shocked. It was summer, and although they were getting closer to the river, the temperature was too outrageous. Kichudi, look, the river is frozen. Kikaniwan shrank into her clothes. her nose clanging, and suddenly unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up from the seat. She looked at the water in the distance and shouted excitedly, "It's really frozen. It's amazing. It's frozen in the summer. It's even more outrageous than snowing in June." Chapter 398. Cold. In May, the river is frozen? Kichudi couldn't believe it reflexively, but when she drove the car forward, she was horrified to find that everything was true. How could a river that could build a dam be an ordinary small river? In summer, the width of the river bank is at least 30 to 40 meters, and the depth is 20 meters. However, even with such a turbulent flow, it was frozen visibly at this time. "Stop the car. Stop the car quickly. Let's go down and take a look." Kika Niuan was not just playing around. She was really interested in the reason why the river was frozen. Kichudi didn't say much and parked the car directly on the road. "Wow. So cool." Kika Niuan stood on the bridge, looking at the river in sight, all frozen into ice, and couldn't help but shouting. Kichudi didn't care about these. She put out the parking sign and then jumped off the bridge 20 to 30 meters high. Without using the origin talent, Kichudi's origin power is dark green, which represents the origin power of nature and has a strong healing and recovery ability. For Kichudi, who is at the peak of level 3 blue steel, jumping from a height of 20 to 30 meters is as easy as eating and drinking. She didn't even roll to relieve the force, but stepped directly on the ice. Dung. A muffled sound rang out, and Kichudi moved her feet, looking at the slightly damaged ice surface. Her brows furrowed deeper and deeper. How could this be possible? She jumped from a height of more than 20 meters, and the impact of the fall can be imagined, but the ice surface did not break, which means that the thickness of the ice layer is far beyond her imagination. This is not something that an ordinary evolver can cause. Not to mention a pure frost source power. Even the original talent with freezing ability cannot cause the current situation. Kichudi clenched her fist tightly, holding the emerald source power, and hammered it heavily on the ice surface. There was still a muffled sound. Kichudi's entire arm dug into the ice surface, and the transmitted source power even extended to a distance of 7 or 8 meters in front. However, there was still no water flow, and it was still a frozen ice layer. "Are you kidding? This is at least 10 meters of ice." Kichudi murmured in confusion. She even considered whether to give up this task. As the old saying goes, it takes more than one day to freeze 3 feet of ice. But can you believe that it only takes a few hours to freeze 10 meters? This degree, this effect comparable to a natural disaster is definitely a 6th gold level evolver. Kichudi's judgment was almost squeezed out from between her teeth. She looked far away, looking at the vaguely visible dam, and her heart was extremely entangled. Impossible. It shouldn't be. This morning, she was still fishing in the upper reaches of this river. Although the temperature of the river water was a little cold, it was not cold enough for her hands. But why is it like this here? I must go and see. Kichudi no longer hesitated. She turned and walked to the bridge pier, attached the source force to her feet, and ran vertically onto the bridge. "Kichudi, how is it? How is it? How thick is the ice?" "At least 10 meters." Kichudi put away the sign and got into the car directly. Hearing her words, Kika Niuan stopped smiling and his eyes widened. "You are kidding. 10 meters. Even in the coldest winter, it may not be this deep. I'm sure it's at least 10 meters. Kichudi started the car and roared the accelerator. She ignored the traffic rules and started to speed along the road at a speed that was almost like flying close to the ground. The pointer of the speedometer directly deceived the red. Even the military off-road vehicle began to drift, but Kichudi did not hesitate at all. Her physical fitness as an evolver was perfectly exerted at this time, and this kind of suicidal speed became the norm. Kika Niuan was not young anymore. She took out her cell phone and sent a message to Jiang and Yu, and soon received a response. Kichudi, the minister said that the one who could cause such an effect should be a 6th gold level evolver of the ice attribute, and the effect produced when the source power is fully released. I know, it should be like this, but Kichudi, or 3 blue steel level evolver, felt cold at this time. She looked at the thermometer that was already above 0 degrees, and her teeth were trembling a little. Now, there are a total of 9 6th gold level evolvers who have revealed their identities in the world, and among them, there is only one person with ice attribute. It shouldn't be him. Kichudi. I saw a report about him yesterday. He is on vacation in Europe and participated in some wilderness survival competition. Kikaniwan was also a little nervous at this time. That was a 6th gold level evolver, the pinnacle of the mortal world. A human-shaped nuclear bomb. Destroying a metropolis with millions of people was as easy as playing. Yes, it's not him. It shouldn't be him. Kichudi muttered, trying to make herself less nervous. She held the steering wheel and stared at the front, afraid of missing anything unusual. Kichudi, there seems to be an animal in front. It's a wolf. Kichudi said nothing and began to slow down the car. Of course, compared with the running wolves, their speed was still faster, so the two were slowly approaching. Oh my god. They are all wild beasts. Kikaniwan has always been fearless, but at this time, she really felt scared. She didn't feel anything when she was far away, but once the car drove in, the white flock of sheep in the sight before turned into a terrifying wild wolf. Nearly 10,000 white giant wolves, like an avalanche, moved forward in unison, as if they were an army, and even deliberately avoided the road, very courtesy to pedestrians. These wolves have snow-white fur, clear blue eyes, sharp claws like ice, and a frosty temperature in their breath. The wild wolves the size of wild oxen followed at the end. A little further ahead was the wild wolves the size of adult rhinos. The larger ones had not yet appeared in the sight of the two women. Kichudi, how about, let's go. Kikaniwan had always been fearless, but looking at the tide of wolves in front of her, she was really scared. The wild wolves the size of calves were obviously wild beasts of level I bronze, and the rhinoceros-sized ones should be level 2nd black iron. If there were any bigger ones in front, they would all be level 3 blue steel beasts. No, we must figure out what happened. Otherwise, the city is over. Kichudi was a member of the 19th Bureau of the National Security Bureau after all. She was responsible for protecting the people, so even at this time, she had no fear of retreating. Until Kichudi saw the wild wolf that was as big as an elephant and trembled slightly with every step. She felt a little timid in her heart. I can't retreat. If I retreat, millions of people will be killed or injured. Kichudi is not a god after all. She will also be afraid, but at this moment, even if she is extremely cowardly in her heart, she has no intention of escaping. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399, Lord of the Wolves. Kichudi. It's strange they don't attack us. Kikaniwan's optimistic personality made her seem a little heartless. After she found that the wolves had no intention of attacking, she immediately regained her spirits. Because it was too cold in the car, Kichudi had already turned on the heating air conditioner. Kikaniwan huddled in her long-sleeved coat, looking at the wolves outside with bright eyes. Wow, so cool. So cool. If I could control so many wolves, I would definitely go to the grassland to build a country. The words that came out of Kikaniwan's mouth were sometimes really hard to understand. She stared at the wolves for a long time, then took out her mobile phone and started recording, and even added sound. Kikaniwan. We are not playing now. Be careful not to disturb the wolves. Kichudi was frightened by Kikaniwan's boldness. The wolf pack exceeded 10,000, which was really boundless, not to mention that some white wolves were even bigger than the off-road vehicle she drove. It's okay, they must have an owner. They don't run into the road. How good. Kikaniwan's face was already excited. She even opened the car window and took a few photos at close range. Hey. Kichudi, look at the ice. There are wolves on the ice. Keep your voice down. I can hear you. Kichudi turned a corner along the road at this time and drove parallel to the river. From this distance, the ice surface has been frozen. The dense wolves are running on it, neatly like an army waiting to be inspected. Kichudi, I guess their owner is in front. If you drive faster, you will definitely see it. Kikaniwan was no longer afraid at this time. Although her idea was not bad, it was not small. Kichudi hesitated for a while, but still nodded. I'm also very curious about their owner. Kichudi has calmed down now. She compared the surrounding maps in her mind and judged the possibility of the wolf pack entering the city. If their destination is also the dam, then theoretically speaking, Kichudi really doesn't have to worry about the wolf pack entering the city. The dam is actually still far away from the city. Even if the wolf pack keeps its current speed, it will take at least 10 hours to get there. If they find the problem, they will definitely have time to warn the city. Their fur looks soft, as if you touch it. Kikaniwan's cheek was pressed against the car window, and her expression looked very ridiculous, but Kichudi did not stop her, because through the previous things, Kichudi had confirmed that Kikaniwan's visual ability was better than her, or 3 blue steel evolver. I believe that, as long as he gets close to the owner of the wolf pack, Kikaniwan will definitely be able to see the other party's identity. Kikaniwan, who had been making disgusting sounds, suddenly exclaimed. Kichudi slowed down the car slightly and looked over, but saw nothing. Kikaniwan, what did you see? Kichudi, I seem to have seen the owner of the wolf pack. Kikaniwan turned her head and looked at Kichudi for a moment. The expression on her face was a little panicked, and there was an indescribable fear. Did you see it? Who is it? Kichudi was shocked, stepped on the accelerator, and accelerated again. Kikaniwan, tell me, who is it? What are you hesitating about? It's Sukinghan. Kikaniwan's voice was a little uncertain. Kichudi had already driven the car to the front of the wolf tide. She looked a little further away and saw the figure in front of the wolf pack. It was a girl who was so beautiful that she was a little unreal. She walked in front of the wolf pack with a straight posture and flexible body lines between her steps. The curve of her chest was not the plump type, but the kind of straight without any burden. The long ice blue hair fell behind the girl, fluttering in the wind with the biting wind. At this time, the length of the girl's hair was nearly 1.5 meters, and it fell below the knee. Such long hair should give people a sense of burden and redundancy, but the invisible and intangible frost source power on the girl made her hair float particularly beautifully, and the fine ice mist lingered between her hair, showing a hazy beauty. The girl's light blue eyes were clear and deep, her light pink lips were shiny, and her well-proportioned facial features were arranged in a delicate manner like a sculpture. However, her expression was a little gloomy, and her willow-like eyebrows were slightly frowned, as if she was recalling something sad. She was wearing a snow-white dress, which was not a modern style of clothes, but a gorgeous dress full of fantasy style. The pure white half-side cape hung from her left shoulder, making the girl look very real. It was like a substantial ice blue source of power lingering around the girl. She walked on the ice, and the river water in front of her for more than 10 meters continued to freeze. The lively fish were instantly frozen in the ice, and gradually turned into dead things. It's really Sukinghan. Kichudi was dumbfounded at this time. It was hard for her to imagine what happened. Sukinghan would cross nearly 100 kilometers from Maoan village to the outskirts of Shanhei city. Moreover, wasn't Frost Disaster Sukinghan an evolver of the 3 blue steel rank? How come he has now become the 6th gold rank? This span is too big. She is really at the 6th gold level. Kikaniwan was still messing around before, but at this time, she was really honest. Even though she was dozens of meters away, the irresistible aura on Sukinghan still made her feel uncomfortable. On the ice, Sukinghan took shallow steps, and it didn't seem very fast, but under the invisible push of the source force, each step of Sukinghan was dozens of meters away, as fast as a flash. Kichudi. She found us. Kikaniwan's senses have always been very sharp. When Sukinghan stopped and turned to look at them, Kikaniwan was so scared that her heart beat half a beat slower. That feeling was like an ordinary villager being stared at by a giant dragon. You don't need to do anything at all. The simple pressure makes you stiff in place. I know. Kichudi also began to speak unclearly at this time. She could already see that Sukinghan was stopping and waiting for them, as if he wanted to chat with them. Under the scorching sun, Kichudi could not feel any warmth. She could only feel cold, a cold that penetrated deep into her bones, a cold that could not be relieved, even by releasing her source power. At the end of her sight, the towering dam stood quietly, with the surging water rushing through it, making a thunderous roar. The running wolves seemed to have heard a new order. They no longer simply moved forward, but began to disperse in two, forming countless streamlines, and extending into the distance. Kichudi, Sukinghan is ordering the wolves to surround the dam. Kikaniwan was already crying at this time. She was not crying because of fear, but because she was freezing. It was so damn cold. Chapter 400, Peaceful Dialogue. I know. Kichuda's voice was also a little trembling at this time, but compared to Kikaniwan, her situation was much better. The coldness created by the source power had the effect of freezing the soul. Kichudi used all her strength to stimulate the source power. Although she could barely resist, the speed of consumption was too much for her to bear, especially when they were getting closer to Sukinghan. On both sides of the car, the white wolf tide had turned into countless streams. They expanded the scope of the circle and began to disperse the intruders around. The dam hiding the secret was gradually trapped by this closed loop. Just when the wolf pack gradually disappeared in the distance, Kichudi and Kikaniwan finally approached Sukinghan and the river. At this time, Sukinghan had no intention of targeting the two of them, or if she wanted to, she didn't even need to take action. Just a thought. Kichudi and the other person turned into ice sculptures. They were able to get close to Sukinghan because Sukinghan wanted to see them. That's all. The car is broken. Kichudi looked at the figure more than 10 meters away, and every breath was a little laborious. Kikaniwan huddled up at this time, and was no longer in the mood to complain to her. At this time, the temperature around was too low. It was not the ordinary cold that humans could touch. The engine of the car had been turned off, and the driving parts had been frozen into ice. Get out of the car. Kichudi reached out and grabbed Kichudi, inputting her own source power into her body, and at the same time, included Kikaniwan in the lingering source power. Thank you, much better. Kikaniwan's teeth were chattering with cold. She held Kichudi's hand and followed her out of the car. Then the two of them walked towards Sukinghan in fear. Along the way, nearly 100 level 3 blue steel wild wolves were crawling on both sides. They seemed to be Sukinghan's guards and would not leave easily. Under Sukinghan's command, these elephant-like white waves were unexpectedly good. They just stared at Kichudi and the others, paying attention to their every move. Apart from that, they didn't even show their teeth. Kichudi, Kikaniwan, I really didn't expect to meet you here. Sukinghan stood in the frozen river, and her every move was terrifying. She had tried her best to show a gentle attitude, but the full power of the 6th gold evolver was really too scary. I'm sorry, it's a little scary to put on such a big formation, but don't worry, they won't hurt you. Haha. That's good. Although Kikaniwan and Sukinghan didn't have much contact, their relationship was still relatively good. She took the initiative to take over the main chat, which was really good news for Kichudi. Sukinghan, I haven't seen you today. You are so strong now. Don't be so restrained. Just chat. Sukinghan saw the uneasiness of the two women and waved her hand gracefully. The white wolf beside her immediately lay on the ground sideways, with its paws in place, looking like a big furry sofa. Then, a white wolf also lay down behind Kichudi and the others, turning its belly into a sofa backrest and its curled up limbs into sofa cushions. You can sit down too. They are actually very docile. They won't hurt anyone until I lift the order. Sukinghan made a gesture to invite them to sit down. Kichudi and Kikaniwan didn't dare to refuse this courtesy. The two looked at each other and sat down tremblingly. To Kikaniwan's surprise, the white wolf's sofa was unexpectedly comfortable. Their fur was very smooth and soaked in the source power, making it very comfortable to sit on. Oh, it feels so good. Kikaniwan was very nervous just now, but now seeing Sukinghan's good attitude, she swelled up. Not only did she have the courage to sit down, she also reached out and stroked the belly of the white wolf. She was so brave. As long as you are satisfied, I'm afraid that you will misunderstand and make a joke. Sukinghan put the left side shawl on her knees. She had a faint smile on her face, neither distant nor close. Miss Sukinghan, do you want to see us? Is there anything? Kichudi sat upright on the wolf's legs. Although she did not show any hostility, her tone was not good. Kika Nyuan did not expect Kichudi to be so stubborn. She reached out and pinched her quietly, reminding her that they were now at the mercy of each other, and she would die if she said the wrong thing. Kichudi, Kika Nyuan, my current behavior may cause you to misunderstand, but please rest assured that I'm not here to show my power. I just want to end a cause and effect. Su Qinghan spread her jade-colored palms, and the invisible source power gathered in the air with her movements, shaping the complete shape of a dam in the blink of an eye. It must be said that the mental power of a 6th level gold evolver is too terrifying. The dam scanned by mental power is almost the same as a real dam, coupled with the peak source power shaping ability of the mortal world. At this moment, in front of Kichudi and Kika Nyuan, is a dam model that is exactly the same as the real thing. Miss Su Qinghan, are you here for Mu Yingluo? Kichudi had specially checked Su Qinghan's information after returning to Zhejiang. She didn't say everything that happened to the girl, but she must have understood the whole story. Yes, the reason why I came here and became what I'm now is to rescue Mu Yingluo. Su Qinghan did not show any pride in her own strength, but her words showed that she was not happy with this strength. It was obviously the price that was unbearable. What about you? A captain of the assault team protecting the 19th Bureau, a disciple of a 6th gold level evolver, why are you here? Su Qinghan's voice did not reveal hostility, but just slightly emphasized the tone. But such a simple attitude revealed the slightly changed emotional frost source power instantly froze Kichudi and Kika Nyuan to the core. This is still when Kichudi is in the blue steel level, with the source power fully open. If there is no source power coverage, the two girls are probably instantly turned into snowmen. Miss Su Qinghan, don't get excited after hearing my purpose. If it affects your plan, just tell us directly, and we will modify it immediately. Kika Nyuan is a wise man who knows the times. She knows that with such a big gap, they can't hide their lies from Su Qinghan, but if they say they are here to kill Tang Zujian, they can't guess Su Qinghan's mood, so they can only lay out the facts first, lower their posture, and soften their words. After all, Kichudi only knew that Su Qinghan had been hunted by Tang Zujian for a long time, but she also knew that the two were adopted by the same foster mother and were still siblings in name. So, you must leave a way out. Be steady, steady. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.